This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
I'm sorry, it's a boom economy, and that's what we're adjusting to.
Neither party seems to want to take on deficits at all.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off of another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. We're all here on Christmas Eve.
I know.
That must mean we need to get a life.
We do. I'm happy. I'm right where I need to be. We're all good here. The markets are open. I'm right here.
No one's in studio today. It's Terry Wiseman.
I know.
You know, it's great.
Exactly.
Will McCarty, we'll get to him in a moment. It's going to be really interesting. Terry, of course, with all sorts of good work on emerging markets and, of course, the Pacific Rim. It'll give us a sense into 2025 of China, among other things. We'll get to that in a moment. It's a holiday shortened work day. Does that mean you work less? I'm not working less.
No, I'm here, and we'll be here till I'll be here till noon, and then the equity markets closed at 1. The bond market closes a little bit later, 2 p.m. all Wall Street time. So, but folks are in here. We're getting deals done.
On your morning commute, I'm getting ready. The final. We need ham. I need a 12-pound ham. Can you get it?
We'll take it.
I need a spiral ham. I'll take nothing but a spiral ham. If that's your morning, we welcome you on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, Sirius XM channel 121. Good morning, a warming Washington, New York, and Boston as well. On YouTube, really our future. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts out on YouTube. We've been humbled by the growth this year. Thank you so much for that. It is truly your Christmas present to us to see everyone after the commute in their office at home watching our new distribution of Bloomberg Surveillance on YouTube. Let's get right to it. From the Interactive Brokers studios to Bloomberg Business Report, Lisa Mateo.
You got it. And we have futures right now. Well, a little bit of a mix of red and green on the screen. And this is in this holiday shortened trading day. Right now, we'll start with NASDAQ futures, up about 0.1%, 32 points. We have Dow futures, little change, down about 20. S&P futures, little changed, up about 4. We have the 2-year yield at 4.34%. That's little change. And the yield on the 10-year, 4.60%. And that's up about 1 basis point. To currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little change. We have the Japanese yen stronger, euro, British pound weaker, and we have Bitcoin up about 0.3% at just over 94,000. Shares of Honda, they jumped 12% in Asia. That's after its buyback plan eased concerns over the impact of a tie-up with Nissan. Moody's said the proposed deal is overall credit positive for both. Nissan rose about 6%. And the fate of the sale of U.S. Steel to Nippon Steel is in President Joe Biden's hands. This is after a national security panel deadlocked on its review. The president has been opposed to the deal. U.S. Steel down about 3%. Nippon Steel rose nearly 1%. And this is not what you want to hear on Christmas Eve. American Airlines posting on X that it's experiencing a technical issue with all flights. It's trying to fix the problem. Its shares right now are down about 0.5%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Remember when they gave kids wings?
Yes.
My first wings were American Airlines.
Yeah.
They're somewhere. They're out there. My record was on a DC whatever.
Yep.
But younger people today, the turbulence is terrible. My record was throwing up 5 times over the Berkshires from Rochester to Boston.
Your parents must have loved that.
I was like 5 years old, or it was like a different time and place. Nodding his head is Terry Weissman. He's enjoyed this as well. Terry, tell me, at Macquarie, not so much the global view, but the dysfunction between China in the United States. Is it a new story next year, or is it what we've been experiencing?
It's what we've been experiencing. I think the commercial relations between the U.S. and China are going to get worse, not better. In fact, if there's any place where...
Terry, I've got to interrupt. I got a really important headline here. This is really something. Paul Sweeney says, OMG. Paul, why don't you give us the report?
American Airlines grounds all flights nationwide, the FAA says, Tom. So we'll have more reporting on that, but you just couldn't pick up.
There it is. I'm so sorry, Dr. Wiseman, for interrupting. Please, on China, the United States, and American Airlines, please.
Yeah. No, I was saying that the relationship is likely to get worse between the U.S. and China, certainly the commercial relationship. I think President-elect Donald Trump is going to reassert primacy of the U.S. in a lot of national security areas, and one of them, of course, is going to be technology. So right there, you're going to have a situation where we're likely to break with China, and maybe effectively have eventually two technology spheres, one for the U.S.-led world and one for the China-led world. Tariffs, if they're going to come, generally speaking, are much more likely to come on China than they are on Europe or Canada or Mexico. Again, because this is a national security reason and China are strategic competitors. Look, the Chinese have done a fairly good job in 2024 of getting to their growth target of 5%, but they've managed to do it not by virtue of the success of the stimulus that's come in 2024 only. It's come because export growth has been strong and it has supported their manufacturing sector. In 2025, if they achieve 5% growth again in China, but do it again via exports and manufacturing, it will not be deemed to be a success, in part because that export and manufacturing expansion is threatened by tariffs, and two, because they really need to spur growth through domestic demand. If they do that, it could eventually help the global economy. Maybe the U.S. will be satisfied with the economic tone coming out of China, but certainly not satisfied with national security issues.
Terry, is there a bear case for this U.S. dollar? Just in the last several months, it's up almost 6-7% here for the U.S. dollar. I just can't think of even though we're cutting rates, it looks like we're cutting rates at a slower rate versus most of the rest of the world. How do you think about that?
Well, if the rest of the world continues to grow more slowly than the U.S. into 2025, that will be a big factor that will keep the U.S. dollar strong, no doubt. It will encourage the Fed to diverge from the rest of the world's central banks and continue to maintain a more hawkish policy than those central banks. That will be a factor keeping the dollar strong. If there's a case to be made for the dollar weakening from here, it's not so much better economic conditions in the rest of the world. We have doubts about whether that's actually going to prevail in 2025. But better political conditions, yes, you could see that happening. And that could set the stage maybe for European growth in 2026. But of course, currencies like stocks anticipate the future, and we could see stability in foreign exchange by way of that. France finding political stability, Germany finding political stability after February, Canada finding political stability as well. If that were to happen and you get some more pro-growth policies coming out of these new governments in the rest of the world, yes, then we can see the dollar start to fade if this moves.
So with Macquarie's ability from Perth to Sydney, Melbourne's in the middle. I learned to pronounce Melbourne this year.
Oh, yeah?
Melbourne.
Okay.
I can't do it. I don't do it like they do. But Terry, for Macquarie in Australia, how does, as an example, Australia adapt to the permanence of a strong dollar? Is there a change behavior, or is it just people on radio shows yammering away?
Well, to the extent all countries that have seen their currencies depreciate over the last year have adopted effectively to the strong dollar, because when you think about it,
they don't have a choice.
They don't have a choice, and that weak currency at least helps them sustain some aspect of growth, i.e., through export competitiveness, manufacturing competitiveness, etc. So the way to adopt to the U.S.'s strength effectively is to allow your currency to depreciate. The way to adopt to the U.S. threat of tariffs is to allow your currency to depreciate. And I think one reason why other central banks have been much more inclined to be dovish in their policy outlooks and their policy directives in recent weeks is in fact because they are concerned with the prospect of U.S. tariffs. If the Australians, not that they're a target of the U.S. necessarily, but if the Australians were to allow their currency to depreciate, it would be in the face of the slowdown in growth that the U.S. tariffs may cause for the rest of the world, including commodity exporters like Australia.
What do you believe the U.S. Federal Reserve is going to do going forward in 2025? I mean, I think the market's kind of split. They can kind of stay where they are. They can skip. They can pause. I'm not sure what the term is, but maybe certainly not as aggressive as maybe we thought as recently as 6 months ago.
A lot of things that the Fed will do in 2025 hinge on the same thing that a lot of other policymakers will do in 2025, which is, are we going to see aggressive tariffs imposed by the U.S. on the rest of the world? If we do, and if those tariffs produce more inflation than the market currently anticipates, then the Fed will be forced to stay more hawkish. And I think the reason they have turned more hawkish is, in fact, because of anticipation of that.
Terry, thank you for coming in.
My pleasure, Tom.
This is old school
guys.
Wall Street.
Yeah.
Terry members, you work Christmas Eve.
Absolutely.
You come in.
Yeah.
You have a lovely late breakfast.
Right.
St. Regis, corned beef hash.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or, you come in late. Thank you, Terry Weiss, for
pleasure,
coming
Tom.
in. With Macquarie, have a wonderful holiday season.
Thank you.
We'll
Merry
see
Christmas,
you in January.
guys. Absolutely.
A few facts on American Airlines, and the headline is simple. American Airlines grounds all flights nationwide, FAA says. I got to be very careful here because Twitter's Twitter. I don't trust it. Neither do you. but it seems to be IT based. That seems to be the zeitgeist. And there are photographs already of people crowding terminals across this nation. First thing I looked at was DFW. Good morning, Dallas, Fort Worth, and all of Texas. 84% of passengers out of DFW are American Airlines. They have 17.3% of U.S. flights, slightly behind Delta Airlines, ahead of Southwest Airlines, slightly ahead of United Airlines. I didn't expect that, but that's what our sources say. American Airlines operates 6,800 flights per day, 350 destinations. Paul Sweeney's been to all of them in 48 countries. But of course, Charlotte, good morning. DFW, good morning. And I should mention Austin in Israel. Michael Dell will be upset if I don't mention that. But these are headlines. Michael Barr, of course, will be following the story.
And Tom, the stock is off about 4.5% pre-market.
Oh,
trading.
there you go. So there's a market reaction as well on our holiday-shortened trading day. We thank you for being with us. With our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
And we've been talking about it all this morning. Tom, Paul, Lisa, if you are traveling this morning during the busy holiday season, listen up. If you're heading to the airport, American Airlines is experiencing a technical issue with all its flights. All are grounded. In a post on X, the airline says it does not have an estimated time frame, but it is trying to fix the issue in the shortest possible time. A record-breaking nearly 8 million passengers are expected to fly over the next 10 days. Matt Gaetz continues to deny allegations of sexual misconduct following the release of a new report by the bipartisan House Ethics Committee. According to a report, the House investigators found substantial evidence the former Republican congressman paid to have sex with several women, including a 17-year-old girl. Former Republican Congressman Charlie Dent of Pennsylvania spoke to ABC about the report.
Matt Gaetz has a real problem here. He suggested just, I think, over the weekend that he might reconsider his resignation and get sworn in January. I suspect if he were to do that, there would be an immediate motion to expel him.
Gaetz had asked a court to prevent the report's release, but his paperwork was filed incorrectly. Fire officials are investigating a deadly boat explosion in Florida. According to Fort Lauderdale Fire Rescue, they received multiple 911 calls about a massive boat fire. This man saw it happen.
It was just kind of a big explosion. I felt the vibration like through my body.
I saw the boat, literally the top half of the boat fly up about probably 10 feet and come right back down.
The boat was at the fuel docks near the fuel pumps. 5 people taken to a hospital, and rescue crews searched the water for a missing man, but he was found dead hours after the blast. Global news 24 hours a day, and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Out on YouTube, we say good morning. A few of our YouTube listeners and watchers are at DFW. We thank them for monitoring us on cell phone, I assume, as well. You know, I said our goal this year is to push CNN off every monitor in every airport in America. Exactly. We're working on that. I'm kidding, of course. But we say good morning here, and, of course, out on Twitter, a lot of angst, to say the least. You know, it's everybody's nightmare. You got the kidlets going, you're packed up.
Yep.
You know, someone like you is, fun-filled 3 days somewhere.
Yep.
And
then you get, yeah. So if you're an airline, I mean, just the worst case scenario here. And for the travelers, hopefully American Airlines can get this rectified as quickly as possible.
We'll follow it this morning, Arrows. We follow the markets as well. Red and green on the screen. The VIX 19 yesterday comes in more enthusiastic, 16.82. We are on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. We've got futures mix, and this is after the Nasdaq led the indexes higher in Monday trading. That was thanks to shares of chip makers like Nvidia, AMD, Qualcomm, after President Biden announced an investigation into Chinese chip makers for being possible security risks. So what we want to do is check in with them right now. We have Nvidia up about 0.2%, AMD up more than 1%, and we'll check in with Broadcom. They're up more than 1.5%. We have Nasdaq futures up 0.1%, 40 points. Dow futures, little change, down about 14. S&P futures up about 0.1% or 6 points. The 2-year yield at 4.34%, that's little changed, and the yield on the 10-year 4.60%, and that's up 1 basis point. We have Brent crude $73 a barrel, up about 0.5%. WTI crude $69 a barrel. Spot gold higher at $2,615 an ounce, and the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little changed. Few companies making news. That's Amazon. Its workers in North Carolina, well, they filed a petition for a union election. The group claims to have collected signatures from at least 30% of the workforce. And SpaceX's satellite internet business, well, that's making more headway with global carriers. British Airways owner IAG in talks with Elon Musk Starlink to provide Wi-Fi service on its jets. And since we're talking airlines, another check-in with American Airlines shares. They're down nearly 4%, and that's after the FAA said the carrier is grounding flights nationwide due to that technical issue. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
See how Lisa paused there into that report? Mm-hmm. I caught her. She was sipping her Kirkland eggnog. The Kirkland eggnog is pre-made and, quote, already -spiked.
Really?
At your local warehouse. A liter and 3/4. That's called a handle if you have kids that buy that.
Yep.
That's what they do at Richmond. A handle of Kirkland's signature traditional holiday eggnog liqueur has a 14.75%. It's 29 proof. It's like double a beer.
Is it really?
Flowing at the Mateo house, I'd say.
Exactly.
24/7. Have you ever invited in Kirkland eggnog?
No, I'm curious. How many calories are in that?
See, that's where she goes.
If you're looking at a 29 proof eggnog, dear, what is it?
Does it matter?
Do you think Charles Dickens looked at the calories? Joining us now, someone who's tried many eggnogs, Stuart Kaiser, joins us. Again, American Airlines down 4% as well. Thank you so much for joining us in studio on Christmas Eve. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, good morning.
The number one thing we got wrong was growthiness. You had the advantage of Andrew Hollenhorst saying we will have growthiness, we will have higher rates. Does the growthiness continue and make your life in equity markets better?
I certainly hope so. The Fed seems to think so too, which I think was a friendly reminder from the SEP that it wasn't all about inflation risk. That they also think the unemployment rate is going to calm down and growth is going to remain solid. But to be honest with you, I think that's the biggest risk early next year with that unemployment report on January 10th. We're going to get a very quick test of whether the Fed's view of flattening out of unemployment is the case or not. If we do get it, then look, I think equity markets are in good shape. If we get an inflection point higher, it's going to be a tough start to the year, I think.
So what is the 2025 call here? We had 2023, 2024, 20% plus gains in each of those years. How often do we get a third year of performance after that?
I've seen people say it's only happened once, so that doesn't mean it can't happen again. But look, I think the issue is you have about, call it 14 to 15% EPS growth price for next year, which is a pretty solid number.
Yeah, that seems almost aggressive to me, but
yeah, you're going to need to see a broadening out, I think, for that to happen. You've got valuation that's obviously quite extended. So I think if you take those two things together, you're going to say, yes, I might have another double-digit year, but the risk reward around that forecast is really, really tricky here going into 2025.
What are some of the sectors? How are you playing it, either from a sector perspective, a factor perspective? Are we looking for a broadening out of performance in 2025?
Look, I think sector-wise, the area where we've seen the most consistent sponsorship is in financials and banks. So that seems to be the easier trade. Obviously tech, you need to be in tech. Then you've got things like healthcare and energy, which I think have a lot more moving parts and are a lot more tricky, and you need to be nuanced about it. From a factor perspective, if you believe the Fed's forecast, which is kind of a higher for longer profile, what did well in the first half of 2024 when we traded higher for longer? It was large cap, it was tech, and it was growth. So I think that has to be your base case to start the year. And to get the broadening, you're going to need to see that in earnings like we did back in the third quarter.
My tweet of the day here, everybody's working on Christmas Eve. They're all at home having their Kirkland eggnog with a 29 proof, according to Lisa Mateo's reporting. Lawrence McDonald, who had my essay 2 years ago, walking through the wall of money that's out there, the 6 trillion, whatever the number is, I can't remember. He lists over the last 10 years, the 30-year bond. 2.7, midpoint 2.3, down COVID 1.9, and we're back out to like a 4.8% in the 30-year bond. Have you been surprised we've had this great bull market with a migration up in yield?
Yeah, we have been a little bit, and I do think the term premium, particularly that 30-year point in the yield curve.
Define that for people like Lisa Mateo having their third Kirkland eggnog. What in God's name is term premium?
So, term premium, just how steep the bond term structure is. So in this case, a steepening of the term structure, in our view, would mean the 30-year yield is rising substantially. I think if that happens, it's a significant risk for U.S. equity markets. And the reason is this. We could talk about the 10-year yield, which you mentioned at 4.6%. We could come up with a good reason the 10-year yield might go to 5 or 5.5 if we got a very positive growth impulse. It's very hard to come up with a positive reason the 30-year yield would really move higher. So that is probably going to come from inflation and deficit spending and things of that nature. So if there's a part of the yield curve that we are concerned about, it would definitely be really at the very long end of things.
What are your clients telling you about this new Trump administration coming in later in January? Are they positioning around that? Are they treating it as a non-event? Are they becoming more bullish on the margin? What are you hearing from your clients?
I would say definitely not treating it as a non-event.
Okay.
I would say if you think of the election, you had a sentiment response early. Then you had a response to kind of policy proposals. Next year is implementation. And the implementation part, I think, carries a lot of risk to it, right? It's easy to talk about tariffs, but now let's implement tariffs. It's easy to talk about, reining in government spending. We saw with the continuing resolution. The market got a little bit concerned with that. And I think the market's response to that continuing resolution is a shot across the bow that when you actually go to implement these policies, it can create volatility. I actually think a lot of clients are holding trades like, let's say, long dollar, long U.S. equities. And as we get closer to that January 20th, it wouldn't surprise me to see some of that risk kind of trimmed a little bit as the uncertainty or / the reality of policy implementation really hits them in the face.
Is there anything that concerns you in terms of valuation here? I'm just not sure how to get comfortable with valuation. Maybe I can pull out the Mag 7 and get a little bit more comfortable there. I mean, what are you guys doing on your desk? What are your clients thinking about?
Valuation, we think of that as potential energy. So there is a risk you can sell off from a high valuation point, but you need a catalyst to do it. The other thing about valuation is unless you have a holding period of 24 months or beyond, valuation probably shouldn't be your number one consideration. So I would say right here, if you get the earnings growth that the market's forecasting, the valuation is going to be fine. If you start to get earnings growth decelerated, the unemployment rate rising, all of a sudden now you're selling off from a much higher level. So I think it's a risk-reward discussion. So we're very aware of it, but we're kind of looking for what could activate that risk.
Stuart, thank you so much for coming in. I love your segments on industry. I just think they're really, really great when they show you on the trading floor, keeping the young Turks calm. Mr. Kaiser is with Citigroup.
390 Greenwich.
On American Airlines, I'm going to opine that the days of the communication where they make the rules are over. I'm looking at their Twitter feed, and it's all PR stuff to get Paul Sweeney to go to Turks and Caicos, over the weekend. And that looks embarrassing given a complete downtime at American Airlines. Their last tweet with our great Bob, thanks so much for this. Brockton's on top of this story. 6:37, almost an hour ago, was the last real communications, 45 minutes ago. Our team is currently working to get this done, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't work anymore, Paul.
No.
They gotta, the airline, everybody screws up. We screw up. I mean, well, Lisa doesn't, but I have some more eggnog, please. But the rules have changed.
The rules,
communication.
social media communications, everybody knows what's going on real time. And
Real
that's the
time.
problem. Yep.
And it's just that their feed is embarrassing with the marketing stuff still on it. Red and green on the screen. American Airlines has you on the runways. Be careful at terminals today. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, we continue to follow shares of American Airlines, now down nearly 3%. This is after that technical issue. It caused it to ground flights nationwide on one of the busiest travel days of the year. Talk about timing. Over to the markets we go right now. Futures, we're mixed, and this is in pre-holiday trading. Stock trading closes at 1 p.m. Wall Street time. Bond markets close at 2 p.m. Now, after the Christmas holiday, back to business. We have initial jobless claims on Thursday and wholesale inventories on Friday. So we have NASDAQ futures up 0.1%, 42 points. Dow futures little change, down 12, and S&P futures up 0.1% or 6 points. The 2-year yield at 4.35%, that's little change, and the yield on the 10-year 4.61%, and that's up 2 basis points. To currencies, we have the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, little change. We have the Japanese yen, little changed. Euro, same there. British pound up about 0.1%, and we have Bitcoin up 0.3% at just over 94,000. Few stocks on the move. It's shares of New Health. They're up 61%. The reason why? Well, news of the health clinic company's acquisition by New Enterprise Associates and other investors. And then after shooting up more than 80% yesterday after that $775 million investment from Tether, shares of Rumble, they've lost its steam. Shares are down more than 1%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. I have been dying for this conversation. What you do in the academic racket, you go to Union College and then wander by Palo Alto for advanced parchment, is you carve out a niche. Jennifer Lawless owns the high ground on thinking of women in politics. There's women on the run, gender media, and political campaigns in a polarized era. It still takes a candidate. Why women don't run for office, just the getting out there, and not just at the top of the ticket. Professor Lawless joins us this morning from Charlottesville. Jennifer, I'm honored to ask you this question. I'll ask it indelicately. Can America elect a woman for president? What did you learn about the vice president's defeat?
It's a difficult question to answer for a couple of reasons. The first is we've only had 2 women who rose to the top and became the party's nominee, and both of them competed against Donald Trump. So it's difficult to know how much of the losses that both Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris suffered had to do with the fact that they were women or had to do with the fact that they were running against a very unconventional candidate. I would say that after 2016, when Hillary Clinton did win the popular vote, I was more inclined than I am now to say that it was not gender that played a major role in the defeat. Once we start having more than one case, it becomes a little bit harder to make that argument.
Jennifer, thinking about going forward, are there candidates out there? I mean, are there women candidates who consider themselves viable for very senior positions, including the presidency?
Certainly, especially on the Democratic side. About 2/3 of the people who run for office who are women are Democrats. And so the Democrats just have a much deeper bench. But when we think about women like Gretchen Whitmer, who's the governor of Michigan, or female senators like Amy Klobuchar, who are still relatively young and have garnered quite a bit of stature in the Senate, there's a clear path. But what's important to keep in mind is that the presidency is a really coveted office, and there are a ton of men out there who are really interested in the position too. So it's not like they're going to clear the way for a female nominee. I also think that the American public is now more skeptical of the idea that we could elect a woman, and that might make it a little bit more difficult for a woman in 2028.
Okay, why is that? I mean, I look at other nations and I don't have an axe to grind here, folks, but they've basically gone beyond this discussion. And you're saying, I'm going to use a sophisticated term they use on the lawn there at UVA. Yep. Jennifer, you're saying it's worser now?
I think that there's not evidence to suggest that when women run, there's explicit systematic bias against them. There are certainly sexist people out there. There are people who vote based on discriminatory attitudes. But generally, when women run, they do as well as men. They raise just as much money. That's below the presidential level, of course. But what we do see is fewer women putting themselves out there in the first place because the perception on the part of voters, even those who vote for women, is that it's more difficult for women and that their neighbors and friends and family members won't elect women. So we have to dispel that myth and highlight all of the women who do get elected.
Well, let me take as an example, and I got 50 states to deal with here. A 51st state, Canada, a 52nd state, Panama, and Professor Lawless, a 53rd state, Greenland. How about Mayor Wu up in Boston? I mean, they're figuring it out, I guess, hugely controversial. I get that. I don't know Boston politics up, down, and sideways, but how do you get more Mayor Wus in Kansas City or Phoenix?
Well, my research has focused on the fact that it takes a candidate. We need to do a better job recruiting women to run for office. Party leaders, elected officials, political activists, but even family members, colleagues, and friends can play an important role. When they see a woman who they think is qualified to run, they need to encourage her to do it. Men are far more likely than women to look in the mirror and say, hey, I can do that. They also judge themselves relative to the lowest common denominator out there. Women hold themselves up to this hypothetical bar that basically no candidate could ever meet. So that external support and encouragement goes a long way in getting them to enter the electoral arena.
Professor, we're about to turn the page to January, get a new administration in January. What do you think the first 100 days, what do you think the agenda should be for President-elect Trump and his administration?
Well, I think what the new administration needs to do is deliver on what it said it was going to do. Now, that's going to make a lot of people very unhappy, but administrations are generally given a little bit of a cushion those first 100 days. We don't have a real honeymoon period anymore, but there is more goodwill. And so if Donald Trump and his new cabinet want to move forward on immigration reform, if they want to move forward in terms of tariffs, that's their small window to do it. Now, whether I think those are the right policies is a different question altogether.
Jennifer Lawless in Charlottesville, the University of Virginia, with us this morning here. We interrupt an update on American Airlines. There isn't one right now. They've got a 6:37. It's 7:36 Wall Street time. An hour ago, they put out the boilerplate idea. Let me get it up here, Paul, if I can. We're currently experiencing a technical issue. All flights are grounded, as Michael Barr has reported. And within the myriad of Twitterdom and the angst of people here, the major message I see, this is from Jeremiah, can you please provide us an update? American Air should have landed at Philadelphia already instead of sitting at Pittsburgh. And it's just this new communication, Paul, ain't happening. And I don't pick on American Airlines. I think the entire industry is struggling with the speed of communication.
Yep, exactly. Jennifer, what's kind of the latest, or what's one of the most important topics you need to see from this new administration coming in? Is it taxes? Is it migration? Is it, what do you think the key issues that you're looking at?
The two issues that I'm looking at are taxes and immigration. When it comes to taxes, Donald Trump ran a campaign talking about tariffs, talking about the fact that it wasn't going to cause an increase in prices. Economists knew that that wasn't possible. Trump seems to be backing off of that now. Seeing how his supporters and the American public and the middle class in particular deals with this and whether he implements them will be an initial test of his new economic policy. And when it comes to immigration, we're already seeing cities and states saying, look, if the federal government wants to implement immigration reform in the way that they've described it, and if they want to do mass deportations, let them, but we're not going to help. And so I think that, we're going to see quite a bit of federalism rearing its head and maybe working against Republicans in a way that they didn't expect.
Professor Lawless, your take on the billionaire of the United States assisting the president-elect, your take on what we should observe or choose to observe of Mr. Musk.
I don't think that this is going to be a long-term relationship. Basically, Elon Musk has been at Mar-a-Lago since the election. He's played a very, very significant role in shaping the incoming administration's agenda. But at some point, it's going to get boring for him. He has, an iron in lots of different fires. And this seems like it's going to become quite frustrating when he has to figure out exactly how to navigate bureaucracy. So my bet is that we're beginning to see the end.
We got a book next year, Professor Lawless. Come on. You got a book coming out?
I have a book coming out in March.
In March. Okay. Be sure to call us. We'll flog it for you. Jennifer Lawless, absolutely definitive on thinking about women in American politics. She holds court in Charlottesville, Virginia. Red and green on the screen. We're monitoring. Rich, help me here. On American Airlines, down 4%-ish. Is that where we are on a quiet morning? Down 4% on American Air. They've grounded all flights. With an update on that, with our news from New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. And as you mentioned, if you are traveling this morning during the busy holiday season, listen up. If you are heading to the airport, American Airlines is experiencing a technical issue and has grounded all of its flights. In a post on X, the airline says it doesn't have an estimated time frame, but it is trying to fix the issue in the shortest possible time. A record-breaking nearly 8 million passengers are expected to fly over the next 10 days. This woman is at Chicago O'Hare Airport with some advice. Keep cool.
Go with the flow and just, make the most of it.
Americans are also hitting the roads, with AAA projecting a 119 million traveler road-packed area through New Year's Day. And like the old TV show, and then there's Maud, the weather, with snow in several areas of the nation. What will the weather mean for travelers? We find out with Bloomberg meteorologist Rob Carolyn.
There will be a few travel trouble spots, particularly across the southern United States and in the west. A few problems, though, this morning around the Baltimore, Washington area due to a little bit of light freezing rain. That'll give way to plain rain, and then it clears out this afternoon. A few morning snow showers from Boston to New York to Philadelphia, but they'll clear out as well. On the west coast, we've got rain ending in the San Francisco area. Watch for delays. Some late-day showers in L.A., and it looks like showers in Seattle.
Bloomberg meteorologist Rob Carolyn. Thank you. Matt Gaetz continues to deny allegations of sexual misconduct following the release of a new report by the bipartisan House Ethics Committee. The report finding what they call substantial evidence that the former Republican congressman had sex with a 17-year-old girl and other allegations involving paying women for sex and consuming illegal drugs. Bill Clinton has been hospitalized, but a spokesman says he is hopeful Clinton will be home by Christmas. The 78-year-old former president was admitted at a Washington, D.C. hospital after developing a fever. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Michael Barr, thanks so much. Just one tweet out there. This from Not My Cup of Tea. This is the reaction out there. Some of it heated. Please update us on estimated repair time, even if in hours. Thank you. Thank you for that polite tweet. That to American Airlines right now. Michael Barr nailed it yesterday. I think it's called the North Central Paul of the National Football League. Green Bay's an afterthought, and they're 11-4.
11-4.
Yeah, they're in the playoffs now. There's no question.
And they hold their destiny because they play the Vikings this weekend.
This is going to be. Then the Vikings play. Let me say us. The Lions. That's the last game.
Us. People go, "Where's Barr been?"
I know.
You've been consulting the defensive line.
Yeah, exactly.
Like I took a snap, but yeah. I mean, this is really the NFC North.
Why?
Is great.
Why is it this year? What's a pixie dust? Do people want to live in that ugly cold?
Part of it. Well, that's football weather.
That's right.
It's and you would think Detroit is like, yeah, it's well, we're in a dome.
You're in a dome now.
Yeah, that doesn't mean anything. But football is football, man. And they get out there and it's snowing. And
I love the runner for the Detroit Lions. I watched him this weekend. He's like a spark plug. Lions, highest scoring team, 493 points.
How about
all
that?
Against the New England Patriots.
It's going to be a rough weekend, though, for me because we play the San Francisco 49ers.
Oh, boy.
Couch time.
We're going to the bar household.
That's probably where I'll be sleeping, too, man.
Well, the only question is it the couch in the family room or the couch in the garage?
Maybe outside by the garbage cans, probably.
Lisa, you okay over there with the Kirkland?
With the Kirkland
eggnog. You okay? We say good morning to all of you, particularly good morning. Be aware of American Airlines. All flights are down. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Will we continue to follow shares of American Airlines? They're down 3%. This is after that technical issue caused it to ground all flights nationwide Christmas Eve. We go to the markets right now. We'll check in with NASDAQ futures. Up about 0.1%, 38 points. Dow futures, little change, down about 26. S&P futures, little changed, up about 4. We have the 2-year yield, 4.35%. That's little change. And the yield on the 10-year, 4.60%. And that's up 1 basis point. To currency, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, little change. The Japanese yen, a little change at 157.14 against the dollar. The euro is weaker. British pound is stronger. We have Bitcoin at just above 94,000. Few companies making news. It's Walmart. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has actually sued the retailer and its fintech partner Branch Messenger. They claim they require drivers to use expensive bank accounts or be fired. And then Microsoft reportedly trying to lessen its dependence on OpenAI. Sources telling Reuters it's been eyeing internal third-party AI models to power its Microsoft 365 Copilot. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. This is just up on Twitter. This is 22 minutes ago. A major IT outage is the language, Paul. And I'm just reading it as quickly as I can. They're issuing apologies.
Yep, and that's kind of what we're seeing. So better safe than sorry. Ground everything until they figure it out.
84% out of DFW. I don't have the Charlotte statistic in North Carolina. And about 17% of flights worldwide, maybe up to 18% worldwide. as well. It is Christmas Eve, and with that, our gift to you is an extended Lisa Mateo.
Now, a look at the front pages. What's making news around the world? Your daily roundup of today's headlines from major publications.
Your daily look at the front pages, the Christmas Eve edition. It's brought to you by IBKR. Financial advisors switch to Interactive Brokers for lowest cost global trading and turnkey custody solutions. No ticket charges, no conflicts of your interests at ibkr.com/RIA. IBKR, thank you for your many gifts to us this year. Put the Kirkland eggnog down, please. What do you got?
I got it. We'll start with the Financial Times. So they're saying, this is interesting, chief executives, publicly traded U.S. companies, they're leaving in record numbers. This is despite different pay bonuses that they're getting. The reason why they have this fear of turmoil in 2025, they're looking ahead to the next year. This is according to Challenger Gray. So here are the numbers. So in the year to November, 327 chief executives at U.S. public companies announced that they were leaving. And if you compare that to 312 that left in 2019. They say a big part of it, you've heard about it, right? The blue chip companies, Boeing, Nike, the leaders at Intel, they stepped down this year, sinking share prices, one of the reasons. But another concern they say they have is President-elect Donald Trump's tariffs. So you have the CEOs overseeing global supply chains. They are thinking of retiring, considering it, because they just don't want to deal with the headache of it all.
Plus, I also think it's probably the fact that we've had 2 monster years in the stock market where their stock holdings, their personal stock holdings, are probably at all-time highs, and they're like, I'm done. Yeah. You know, what do I want to deal with this stuff anymore? My stock is just worth $1 gajillion. I'm going to just step aside and go down to Boca. You know?
I love the phrase we heard yesterday, going back to Harvey Schwartz, where they talked about pro-tail, which is professional retail.
Yep.
Pro-tail.
Exactly.
Just, there it is. What do you got next?
The next is about Apple, that they could be mean some big money for Apple. This is from Wedbush, Dan Ives, estimates 300 million iPhones are over 4 years old. So that means it could lead to record upgrades. So more people are going to need the new one, and that's going to help push Apple to a $4 trillion market cap by early 2025. He also told clients they're headed for a strong holiday season because all those hundreds of millions of people worldwide, they're going to need to upgrade to those AI capabilities that the iPhones are coming with. And also big key sales in the China market, which he says is the key to all of that.
Has anybody here used AI capabilities? I wouldn't know it if it was looking at me.
It pops up on your Google search now.
Is that an AI
before you kind of
Yes.
get to like the generic Wikipedia answer to whatever you're querying, it'll pop up there. So they're force feeding you it, and it's helpful. I mean, it's helpful, but I'm not fully engaging with it. That's going to be something that's going to take time. But I'm looking at Apple's got a market cap of $3.86 billion right now. So just a whisper away from $4 trillion. Yeah, 3.86 trillion market cap, close to $4 trillion.
I just Googled American Air grounded, and I got no AI from
You got no
Google.
AI.
I didn't have anything on that. See?
We're
AI
not
still
very
working on
AI,
that.
Very AI this morning. Next.
Good point. Okay. Are you ready for football on Christmas with Netflix?
This is a
what could
huge
go
deal.
wrong,
Well,
right?
it went wrong a couple days ago. Somebody had out. It was not successful.
It's not. Okay, so hopefully you have the Netflix subscription. Stan will bring that for you. 2 NFL games, right? You got the Chiefs and the Steelers, 1 p.m. Eastern. Ravens at the Texans, 4:30 p.m. You can, though, watch it free over-the-air TV and the home markets for the team. So just want to put that out there. But 2 questions. Is it okay to watch 7 hours of football on TV on Christmas? And the second one, you had the glitches when you had that Jake Paul, Mike Tyson fight. Football fans are just not as forgiving. So we'll see if that can stand up to the test there. And then you have the debate, too, because it's kind of taking the spotlight off the NBA, which has really, had their whole Christmas
I saw
thing.
summary,
So
really
there's that debate, too. And then the players, now they got to play 4 teams. They're going to play 3 games in 11 days, so that means they're playing more.
Really,
injuries
3
could
games
be.
in 11 days.
So
I mean, and this is the biggest thing for Netflix here is from a technical perspective, no glitches. The bar is super high on the NFL. You can. It's one thing to do, like a tennis match or something, and it doesn't really work, or there's, technical problems. But you cannot do that with the NFL. So this is a big deal.
Let's be optimistic. It succeeds. What's Paul Sweeney's timeline where CBS loses football?
You know what's going to happen? The NFL, there's nobody better in the world at this. They're going to have their product on every single distribution platform out there. Traditional broadcast networks, cable networks, streaming, multiple streamings. They're going to, because why? Then you get more and more people bidding on the rights for your product. And it's up to CBS whether you want to put it on the CBS network or Paramount, the Streaming Plus, whatever that is. Nobody is better than the NFL in maximizing the value of their game. So we'll have to see. It's good.
Yeah. Squeeze one more in here.
Okay, one more. This is the big social media debate. It's called gentle parenting. Okay, this is hashtag gentle. I knew you're going to love this. Okay, so there's 4 rules. Empathy, understanding, respect, and boundaries, okay? You have to talk about feelings, when they're having a tantrum. You got to get down to their level, make eye contact, validate their concerns, say, it's okay, I understand, okay? If they hit another kid, you say, don't hit. You say, use gentle hands, okay? That's the wording now. And you're not supposed to count to 3. Remember that used to be the thing? Like, I'm going to count to 3. I did that, I got to say.
Okay, Miss Mattea, is this working?
I haven't done it. I haven't done the gentle parenting.
I know that Lisa rules her house with an iron fist. I just know that's the case.
You talk about tantrums in the kitchen. When I hear this stuff, you got news here on
American Airlines nationwide ground stop canceled, FAA says. So good news for everybody out there.
That's good news. They think they got it fixed.
Okay, good. Yeah.
When you have the crying kid in the airline.
Yes.
How do you handle that with the gentle parenting?
Well, I've flown back, coast to coast for 20 years with little kids, so I have empathy for those parents. I try to be the empathetic. But
that's
but then at some point I turn around, I'm like, Mom, Dad, get a hold of your kid here. You're in charge. You're the boss.
When I hear
they didn't
it,
have this when
I feel sad for it. I just really. You had all the right phrases, Lisa, of what this thing is.
Yeah, and you know what it is? They're saying it's bigger now because now the adults are starting to be more aware of their mental health, so now they're passing that down onto their kids. I mean, it wasn't a thing when my kids were younger. There was no such thing as gentle parenting.
If you don't go to bed in the next 15 minutes, you don't get a sippy cup. Santa's not showing up, and I'm going to play Andy Williams for the entire Christmas day. Stay with us on this Christmas Eve. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, and Lisa Mattea with Eggnog.
Most wonderful time of the year. There'll be much mistletoeing and hearts will be glowing when loved ones are near. It's the most wonderful time. Yes, the most wonderful time. Oh, the most wonderful time of the
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
I'm sorry, it's a boom economy, and that's what we're adjusting to.
Neither party seems to want to take on deficits at all.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
Stocks are coming off of another record high.
And Michael Barr with news.
Tensions between the U.S. and China have heated up even more.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. If you're advancing through the morning on the American Air grounding, it is ungrounded. The FAA moments ago saying flights in the air, up, and away. American Airlines nationwide ground stop canceled. That, according to the FAA, will continue to follow that story. Good morning, particularly to DFW and to Charlotte, North Carolina. Huge American airline hubs as well. On Christmas Eve, holiday shortened work day, I should say.
I know.
Like what, 11 a.m., 10 a.m.?
I think we got a 1 p.m. for the Wall Street, for the stock market, and 2 p.m. for the bond market.
Can I, dumb question of the day, why can't they get on the same page?
I have no idea.
I mean,
I don't know who's in charge.
What infuriates me about this, let's stop the show here for a rant.
Let's go.
Surveillance rant. All these rules mean the staff has to work. And the fancy people, 100%, 98.2%.
They're down in Palm Beach.
See ya.
Yeah, they're in Palm Beach.
Wherever. I mean, forget about work from home. and so you're staying open till 1 and 2, right?
Yep.
I don't know.
We're here.
It's got to be more, as Jason Furman would say, there has to be more.
I used to love trading on these days. The day after Thanksgiving, the day
best.
before and after
The best.
Christmas, less liquidity. Maybe I could get lucky on a stock that people don't know about.
Yeah,
that was kind of my thing.
Absolutely. 100% agree with that. What I agree with is the VIX yesterday at 19 level comes in sprightly to a 16.84 right now, a better market. From the Interactive Broker Studios, the Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
Good morning. And we're continuing to follow the shares of American Airlines because, like you mentioned, that nationwide ground stop was canceled. The shares, they fell as much as 4% this morning, right now down about 0.5%. To the markets we go. Futures, little change on this holiday shortened trading day. Stock trading closing at 1 p.m. Wall Street time. Bond markets close at 2 p.m. We have NASDAQ futures up 0.1%, 41 points. Dow futures, little change, down 20. S&P futures up 0.1% or 6 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.35%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.61%, and that's up 2 basis points. To currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little change. We have the Japanese yen, same there, little change at 157.13 against the dollar. The euro down about 0.1%. The British pound up about 0.1%, and Bitcoin just over 94,000. Honda shares, they jumped 12% in Asia. That's after its buyback plan erased concerns over the impact of a tie-up with Nissan. Nissan rose about 6%. And then the fate of the sale of U.S. Steel to Nippon Steel in the fate of hands of President Joe Biden. This is after that National Security Panel deadlocked on its review. The president has been opposed to the deal. We have shares of U.S. Steel down about 1%. Nippon Steel rose nearly 1%. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Thanks so much, Lisa. We're doing some odd things here today. We got Stephanie Roth in with us with Wolf, which means we're supposed to talk economics, except she is prodigious. The only one like her is Alicia Levine.
Okay, yep.
Alicia Levine and Stephanie Roth. It's like all math. A master's in statistics from Columbia. She knows the central limit theorem. It's like cold. It's like you learn that stuff, and kurtosis and all the rest of it. I'm going to do an audible with Stephanie Roth. The salient point of the time away from your remit over to strategists at Wolf Research is everything's concentrated. Like really not even like Nifty 50, like we've never seen. And I'm going to read the Greek letters because it's fun. Why not? Omega squared equals W squared. I can't remember. Omega squared plus W squared B 2 times WAWB, omega,
Hike.
and there's a rho on the end as well. The math of diversification has been turned on its head. Is there a mathematics to the market that bounces off your economics?
Yeah, I mean, I think next year we're going to be looking at an economy that should be doing pretty well, which should allow the breadth of the market to improve at least a little bit. At least for the first part of next year until we get talking about tariffs, and then that's where things could become a little bit more shaky.
But your Wolf Research call, dovetailing your economics into, I saw one portfolio now is 58%, their top 10 stocks, is breadth improves.
Yeah, I think breadth should improve next year. We're going to have an economy that runs again for one more year above trend, and the small business areas could start to see some better sentiment. We're starting to see signs of that. This could be a good environment for the smaller business person who's been struggling in the past couple of years.
Paul, the math, there's W is the weight.
Oh, boy.
Omega is the standard deviation. And rho is it's not Sam Rowe, it's rho. Rho is the covariance.
RH. Of course it is. Yeah,
you
absolutely.
and I are going down in flames on this exam.
Exactly. Yeah. My first statistics quiz at Duke, single digits. Let's leave it there. Single digit. I rallied, though. So anyway, Stephanie, talk to us about what do you expect from this economy, given this new administration coming in, a Republican Congress? Do you expect that to be stimulative to the U.S. economy, or are you taking a wait-and-see attitude?
So for next year, it should be net stimulative, partially because deregulation should be good. I do think that the market, specifically the bond market, has probably taken this a little bit too far, and that wasn't helped last week with Powell saying some people incorporated fiscal into their outlooks and some didn't. So then that, of course, led to this bond market sell-off. For next year, we're looking for GDP growth of about 2.2%, so slightly above trend, but slower than where we've been. For 2026 is where the fiscal stuff really matters. Okay. And base case is that it'll be a very expensive fiscal package that's not that stimulative. So it's going to be over $4 trillion just to extend current policy, which is not stimulative for the economy whatsoever. It's just presenting a fiscal drag. And then there might be some other things, no tax on tips that could help at the margin, but not very much. And then, a bit of a tax break for manufacturers domestically. But generally speaking, not that big of a fiscal stimulus.
So given that backdrop, what do you think our Federal Reserve should do? Are they going to pause here for a while, do you think?
No, I think they're going to probably cut twice next year.
Okay.
Market's now looking for 1.4 cuts, so I do think that that's one reason why rates are a little bit high here and they should rally. We're looking for, for the Fed to still be able to cut a couple more times. Big reasons as to why. Labor market is slowing down. There was an impact to the last jobs print of 227, partially from hurricanes, partially from strikes. So if you adjust for all of that, our trend in payrolls growth has been somewhere around 140,000. Yeah.
We had Dana Telsey on yesterday. We were so wrapped up in the Nordstrom takeout, we didn't get to the basic question. What does Wolf Research see on our consumption this holiday season?
Yeah, consumption should be okay. About 3.5% to 4% nominally, which is decent. An okay holiday season. Solid. There appears to be more discounting than normal. So that the way that shows up most for all of us, in looking at the Fed in particular, is going to be a softer core PCE prints for November and December. A big reason is, we got November, but for December in particular, because a lot of those inputs are not seasonally adjusted. So a lot of the goods components that go into core PCE are not adjusted for seasonality. So especially if you have a year with a lot of holiday discounting, that puts downward pressure on December core PCE.
So we talked about the job market. It still seems like the labor market is solid. Is it weakening at the margin? I guess. But boy, 4.1%, I don't know. When I grew up, that was full employment.
Yeah, the labor market's doing just fine. It is slowing, and it should continue to slow. But the breadth in the labor market is the one piece that you would look at to say, okay, maybe it's a little bit softer. So our anticipation is that we'll see a slower growth in terms of payrolls for the first part of next year, and that will allow the Fed to continue to cut twice more.
What do you think about China and its impact on the global economy, on the U.S.? Because, again, you mentioned tariffs. There might be a tariff regime coming in here. How do you think about China and its impact on kind of the global economy and on the U.S. economy?
Yeah, so China, the start of every year, there's this excitement about China doing some big fiscal stimulus, and it doesn't play out. So we think it might be something similar again, where there's all this excitement. China's gonna do fiscal offsets in part because of tariffs. They're probably not gonna react until they have to. So they have a lot of fiscal firepower. They're saving it until they actually see how this all plays out. There's no reason for them to do it in advance. But basically, they'll probably just try to stabilize the economy. There's no reason for them to do some massive fiscal stimulus that will support the rest of the world.
I got Atlanta GDP now, which is a statistic right along day by day by day, rounded up 3.1%. If I throw on a 2-ish, 3-ish nominal, That's an outstanding nominal GDP. Within this conversation, how long does it last? Does it get us to 4th of July, or dare I say, does it get to the Labor Day next year?
Yeah, I think we can easily say till 4th of July we'll have not 3% GDP growth, something that's somewhere between 2 and 2.5, which is solid. That's a very good economy, especially since productivity is driving some of that. But it's not something that's going to overheat the labor market.
Torsten Slok sent me with a poll this morning, the raging debate about COVID and stimulus and all that. What's the why, Stephanie Roth, of how we all got wrong growth? I mean, essentially everybody got it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, everybody. Well, one, if you just look at history and going back to statistics, if you take a sample size of 8, go back in history, talk about how much, what happens when the Fed is hiking materially, that would tell you a recession is imminent. That proved to be entirely wrong.
Right.
And a lot of folks that look back to the 1970s and said this is the exact replica, that was also very much wrong. So I think it was one comparison to history, and every time is different. Sample size is very small. And the fact that fiscal was just still permeating throughout the economy several years after. One thing would be the business tax credits that were getting sent out. Some of which was fraud, but there was a lot of money that got put into the economy that lasted for a while.
Steph, thank you. Stephanie Roth in studio with us today on Christmas. We really appreciate that. Right to it with our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. The FAA says American Airlines' nationwide ground stop has been canceled. American Airlines said it had experienced technical issues affecting all of its flights, disrupting operation on one of the busiest travel days of the year. This is another grim reminder being a police officer is a dangerous job. A suspect is in custody following a shooting death at a Food Lion grocery store in North Carolina. Greensboro police officer Michael Horan was fatally shot responding to a report of an armed man inside the store, according to officials. Greensboro City Manager Trey Davis asking for prayers for police.
Please keep them in your thoughts and prayers. Think about Officer Horan's Greensboro family and the loved ones and those here in this city that support our police department.
Matt Gaetz continues to deny allegations of sexual misconduct following the release of a new report by the bipartisan House Ethics Committee, claiming he paid for sex with several women, including with a 17-year-old girl. Former Republican Congressman Charlie Dent of Pennsylvania spoke about the report.
I'm not surprised that the committee released this report. There's clearly issues here of sex, money, and drugs. Really, these are big issues and big problems.
Gaetz was President-elect Trump's initial pick to be his attorney general. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
It is Christmas Eve, and there it was, Paul, 6 years ago. We were sort of not doing all that well. 2018. Yeah, exactly. It comes up in the Bloomberg perfectly. And a guy named Ben Laidler, then at HSBC, said, shut up and buy on the drawdown as it was. Up 154% over the last 6 years, SPX. Up 16.8% per year.
Yep.
We talk about October 22 at Yardeni and Kapora, others. There was, of course, the COVID drawdown. This was lower than the COVID drawdown. Christmas Eve, 2018.
Yep.
Benjamin
We haven't had a
Laidler.
drawdown more than 8% in this calendar year, though.
Yeah.
So, a lot of folks are saying, where's the pullback? Maybe not.
I'm looking at, we'll have to see. Bloomberg surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, shares of American Airlines, they were on the mend. They were down as much as 4% this morning. Now they're down about 0.7%. Nationwide ground stop, it was canceled after that technical issue affected flights for nearly an hour this morning. To the markets we go, where futures, well, were mixed, and this is after the NASDAQ led the indexes higher in Monday trading. That was thanks to chip makers like NVIDIA, AMD, Broadcom. President Biden announced an investigation into Chinese chip makers, so we'll check in with them now. We have NVIDIA up more than 0.5%, Advanced Micro Devices and Broadcom both up more than 2%. We have the NASDAQ futures up 0.1%, 40 points. Dow futures little change, down 20. S&P futures little changed, up about 5. The 2-year yield at 4.35%, that's little changed, and the yield on the 10-year 4.61%, and that's up 2 basis points. We have Brent crude at $73 a barrel, WTI crude $69 a barrel. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, that's little changed. And companies making news, it's Amazon. Workers in North Carolina, well, they filed a petition for a union election. That warehouse has about 4,300 employees. And SpaceX's satellite internet business, that's making some headway with some global carriers. We're talking about British Airways owner IAG. It's in talks with Elon Musk Starlink to provide Wi-Fi service on its jets. For more on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News now. Wherever you get your podcasts, I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Again, the VIX yesterday, we had a 19 print. We come down to 16.81, sort of halfway back to nirvana. Those levels now on closing near 43,000 on the Dow, near 6,000 on SPX, and NASDAQ 100, 21,500. RJ Gallo joins now with Federator Mez. And what's great about him, not only the fact that he goes back to, are you ready for this? Kidder Peabody.
Tom, pound for pound, one of the best firms on Wall Street.
He was like 17 when he worked there.
Yeah, exactly.
But also with real-world investment management for a while at Columbia University, and again, the Federal Reserve tour duty as well. RJ, the independence of the Fed, I sort of ignore the stories. I let Mike McKee worry about that. Let's go McChesney Martin. Should we be concerned about the independence of the Fed?
Well, good morning and happy holidays. That's a great question as we round out the year and we round out the Biden administration. Heading into Trump 2.0, I think we have to remember that President Trump appointed Jerome Powell, and that didn't make him at all hesitant to bash Jerome Powell when he felt that he needed to back during Trump 1.0. I think as we go into the second iteration of Trump with the willingness to openly criticize the Fed, second-guess their operational independence, we do need to be a little concerned about how intense the conflict between the White House, Treasury, and the Fed may become. And I think as a bond investor, it's pretty clear that, yes, we did have an inflation problem, a big one, coming out of the pandemic. But for decades, the operational independence of the Federal Reserve has served investors extraordinarily well. And the threat to that should not be welcome.
Are we still in a disinflationary trend within all the cross currents out there, the people looking not so much higher for longer, but just an inability to bring rates down? Can Federated say that we do have a disinflation tendency?
The market's confidence around the inflation trajectory from here has clearly eroded. At Federated Hermes, I think we are of the view that we are in the soft landing, which is nice. Historically, when the Fed tightens drastically, you have a recession. It didn't happen this time. The economy is doing well. Unemployment is still low in a longer historical sense. 4.1, 4.2% unemployment is not a recession. The inflation story is much better than it was. Mid 2s to maybe up to 3, depending upon which statistic you like to look at, is a vast improvement from where we were. So I think we can check the box on the fact that the soft landing, in fact, seems to have occurred. But going forward, that inflation trajectory is obviously less certain. The economy is still plugging along rather well. The inflation story, there's divided camps between sticky inflation versus a resumption of a downward drift. I think we're in the case of a downward drift, but that's not without risk. And that's one of the reasons why the term premium estimates of the term premium are model driven, yes, but they've all surged. And they've all surged since the Fed's 50 basis point easing because the inflation trajectory in part is uncertain.
I haven't quoted this today, Paul, but I think it's really, really important. I mean, I'm focusing on Kirkland eggnog.
Yep.
And of course, the American Airlines debacle. The 10-year real yield, folks, 2.27%. If you don't follow the inflation-adjusted yield, to see it go 190 up to 2.27, that's some angst within the system.
That's as high as it's been since back in like April, May, Tom.
Yeah.
So you keep an eye on that. RJ, what we know, I guess what we've heard from the incoming President-elect Trump is tariffs, immigration reform, and a lot of folks are concerned that those two things in and of themselves may be inflationary. Is the bond market reflecting that at all?
I think it is. Yeah, I think inflation break-evens have risen from where they were a number of months ago when the election result was still obviously unknown. I think that the prospect of tariffs in a textbook sense should lead to higher prices on imports, a lower volume of imports, some substitution to domestically manufactured goods, and overall a little bit of a boost to inflation. When it comes to the immigration side of the policy mix, it depends on how aggressive the Trump administration actually gets. There are plenty of workers in this country who might face the threat of deportation, and that could be an undesirable shock to the labor markets. Certainly in some industries, that could drive up wages there. And to the extent that gets passed through, you could have an inflation issue there. So I do think that the tariff and immigration policy mix hold the potential to boost inflation, and bond markets are about trying to price the future, and if it's uncertain, demanding a greater risk premium for that uncertain future. That's partly why the yield curve has steepened. It's partly why the term premium is higher for those reasons.
What do equities do given a higher term premium? Is there any discussion of that, or are they so unpredictable you can't even go there?
Well, one thing's for sure, here we are on Christmas Eve, and the stock market's up 25, 30%, cash is up 4 or 5%, and bonds are up like 1%. So there's a good reason why the bond guy is here talking to you today on Christmas Eve.
Got that right.
I think that as you look forward with respect to the equity bond interplay, so Phil Orlando, Steve Auth, my colleagues on the equity side, I think they're pretty comfortable. If the 10-year Treasury stays south of 5, then the discounted cash flow analysis can still be supportive to a relatively favorable equity performance. My question is, if you break above 5 or if you become highly volatile, that can sort of erode the risk asset performance. So we're going into the year pretty optimistic on equities, still overweight equities in our asset allocation models that we share with clients and by which we run our balance funds. But it's obviously clear that if interest rates become more volatile and start to spike, that would be a challenge to equities. That's not our base case. Our base case is constructive. Bonds are finally giving you some yield and going to give you probably a low mid-single digit total return this year. But the risks around that return, given the Trump administration's policy mix, are certainly a little higher, and the interplay of stocks and bonds is a good question as we move into this more uncertain policy mix.
Paul, did someone say spiked?
What's oh sure yeah
RJ Gallo, thank you so much, was federated on spiking yields this year. I had no idea. I mean, every time Lisa talks to me, I learn something. There's an oil drum size traditional holiday eggnog liqueur. You ready for this? Thank you. All recipes for this: real dairy cream, whiskey, spiced rum, brandy, and French vanilla. It's a hit for the holidays.
I'm sure
you ready for this? Yep. I would have thought this was popping $30, $40. $9.99.
Right down the middle of the fairway for us. Bring
and
that
they
to the
sell it out.
Christmas table.
Yeah,
exactly.
I'll say at least. Thank you for that, all recipes. Good. That's on a need-to-know basis.
Yep, exactly.
I guess it's a huge thing. They brought it back. They have these successes. It's just like it's no different than Hermes or LVMH. No. You have a success, you take it away.
Yep.
Don't have it one year.
Yeah, limited
supply. Then you bring it back,
yep.
and everybody like
great
Lisa
demand
goes mental. The oil drum size, 55 gallon. That's a lot of real dairy cream. We say good morning to all of you celebrating with eggnog across this nation. Drive careful and fly careful. American Airlines is flying. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, little movement in futures. This is in pre-holiday trading. Don't forget, stock trading closes at 1 p.m. Wall Street time. Bond markets at 2 p.m. After the Christmas holiday, back to business. We have initial jobless claims on Thursday, wholesale inventories on Friday. Right now, NASDAQ futures up 0.2%, 48 points. Dow futures, little change, down about 21 points. S&P futures up about 0.1% or 7 points. The 2-year yield, 4.35%. That's a little change, and the yield on the 10-year, 4.61%, and that's up 2 basis points. To currency, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little change. The Japanese yen, little change at 157.11 against the dollar. The euro, weaker. British pound, stronger, and we have Bitcoin up just above 94,000. Few stocks on the move. It's shares of New Health. They're up 64%. This is after news the health clinic company's acquisition by New Enterprise Associates and other investors as well. And after shooting up more than 80% yesterday after that $775 million investment from Tether, shares of Rumble, well, they've lost some of their steam. They're now down about 1%. And another check-in with shares of American Airlines. They are down about 1% after that nationwide ground stop was canceled. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Futures up 7. Bloomberg surveillance this morning. We're brought to you by Interactive Brokers Trade. Over 10,000 U.S. stocks and ETFs, U.S. equity index options, U.S. treasuries, and more on your timetable. Learn more at ibkr.com/around the clock. Follow up to our great interview yesterday with Dana Telsey. Really an honor to have her on with the privatization, if you will, of the Nordstrom family. Yep. Seattle, her math in her published report this morning, I was shocked. 5.3 times forward EBITDA. In the radio boom, people are at 10, 11, 12 times EBITDA. There's just no enthusiasm in retail.
No, there really isn't. I mean, it's just a low margin, low growth business, and it's all about execution. That's what I've learned from the Dana Telseys of the world. You got to go with the management teams that actually are getting it right.
I'll say this once more near the end of the 9 o'clock hour, but just thanks so much for the kindness on YouTube. When they first said to me and Paul, they said, we're going to do live chat on YouTube. I said, live chat? Is there dead chat? And I was amazed by it. And it's really quite a growing family. Jay in Detroit, thank you. He's just pointing out the Lions are doing
better than good.
Better than good.
Yep.
With us now, we go back to back on yield because the foundation to the equity market is what fixed income does. Brett Barker joins TCW Group, co-head of global rates. Same question I asked R.J. Gallo, Brett Barker. Is there a disinflationary trend in place that gets us through 2025? Price up, yield down.
Good morning. Thanks for having me. I think for us is we do think that there's not an inflationary impulse. How's that? Disinflationary might be a strong word, but for us, I think the market's kind of telling the same thing. For all this hoopla about tariffs and higher growth, you're just not seeing a big inflationary impulse in the markets. We look at tip break-evens or inflation-protected securities. And it's interesting because this sell-off we've had the last week and a half is not really inflation-driven. It's been driven by real yields. And you're not seeing the same kind of signal from either from gold or oil. So the commodity index is not telling you an inflation impulse either.
Okay, first thing I look at every day, Brett, I'm an amateur. I look at 2.26% on the 10-year real yield. I assume that's nonlinear, but is it kinked or does it have a jump condition at a certain yield? If I get to 2.30%, do I need to go to 2.5? Where does the real yield indicate the system starts to unravel?
I'm not sure there's an actual level for you, but I think we're getting close. I think this is really reminiscent of the fall of 2023. If you remember back then, there was a lot of talk of risk premium, fiscal largesse, right? And we had real rates in the 30-year sector close to 260. We're not too far from there now, and the 10-year rates within 20 basis points where we were there. So I think we look at that, I think real rates are restrictive. So for us, I think you're getting close to these points. I think people are talking about how high we can go. It's like, well, I think at this point in time, you're basically back to almost pre-GFC levels on real rates. And we don't think the economy is the same as it was in pre-GFC. So we think these are pretty restrictive real rates.
Brett, what do you expect? What do you think the Fed is thinking these days? I'd love to just get your view on the Fed here, because there's a lot of folks that are just saying, hey, this is a Fed that in 2025, they don't need to be aggressive at all. What do you think?
Well, we're looking for a cyclical downturn, and I think that Powell is rightly concerned about the labor market. I think in the press conference, he noted himself that the run rate or the job creation is not enough to maintain unemployment. And we agree. You're seeing a lot of signals that the labor market is cooling. The hiring rate's at a 15-year low. If you look within the payroll, the household report itself, the average time to get a job is 24 weeks. It was 21 a year ago. So, and on a weekly basis, the continued claims continues to stay elevated. So no one's really losing their job yet, but it's really hard to find one. So for us, we think the Fed will probably, be on hold here for a little bit of period of time, and this holding rates higher for longer is going to kind of continue to roll the economy over and be a struggle.
We interrupt our conversation with Brett Barker now because it's a winter wonderland in New York City. For those of you on radio, good morning. 99.1 FM in Washington, up to Mount Katahdin, and 92.9 Boston. How rare is this, Paul? A winter wonderland.
It's lovely this time of year.
It's like snowing outside.
Snowing in New York City. There's nothing better than that until it turns to slush and brown black slush.
I may threaten in 20 minutes to play some Bob Goulet.
Yeah, we could do that.
Robert Goulet.
We could do that. We could do that.
In a winter wonderland. Why don't you bring us back to Brett Barker of TCW Group?
Hey, Brett, are you guys taking credit risk? Because I'm looking at the returns in 2024. And boy, in the fixed income world, high yield leverage loans, you're popping north of 8% total returns. Do I take that credit risk in 2025?
We don't think you do. We're value investors, so we're pretty defensive. I think they've had a great year, but I think in credit it's kind of where you end. Actually, it's where you start and where you end. So when you look at IG, look at IG spreads, they're at mid-70s over Treasuries. That's almost a near all-time tight level. So I think you look at these yields, and if you see IG credit at north of 5%, it looks attractive. But we tell our clients is 80-85% of that is actually the risk-free rate. So, be careful when you're not so much that we're expecting a major blow up here, but really you're not getting compensated for the risk when we look at the value proposition for us. So we're defensive on credit in 25.
Defensive on credit in 25. How about some of the agency stuff out there? Again, a lot of folks come in here and they tell us, the mortgage market, the agency market. Is that something you guys play in?
We do. We're overweight, and what's not to like? Basically, you have kind of quasi-government guaranteed paper. This is GSE, agency mortgage-backed securities, so Fannie and Freddie. And the underlying collateral is the U.S. housing market. And this is not the same housing market as pre-GFC. LTVs, a loan to value, are really low given the run-up in home prices here. So for us, you're getting an asset that is high quality, and the spread is 130 basis points to Treasuries. So not quite double the IG index, but this to us is a really good opportunity for our clients going forward in 25.
Brett, we got breaking news here in the Northeast. Got to leave you alone. You're smarter than we are.
LA.
You're on the left coast. Brett Barker, thank you so much with the Trust Company of the West, TCW Group. Let me read this in its entirety 8 minutes ago. Not a shock to those of you from 99.1 FM up to 92.9 FM. Alert. Due to mechanical and equipment issues, Acela trains 2154 and 2173, I was on 2173 like 10 days ago, are now canceled between Washington and Boston. Customers will now rebook to the next available American Airlines service. No, I'm kidding. We'll now rebook to the next available service. We sincerely apologize for any inconvenience. The best thing about going to Davos is the Swiss trains.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic.
We put a man on the moon.
Yeah, exactly.
The Red Sox once won the World Series, actually more than once. Why can't we get our trains to work?
It's just because we're an automobile society. The interstate highway system.
Way back.
That's kind of how we roll. But again, you look right outside the Lincoln Tunnel here. They're working like crazy to modernize that critical part of the Northeast Corridor. Yeah. So I have to give them a little bit of credit. They're working like amazingly fast, and they got a million people there. But you're right, the Acela train, which it works. It works for Michael McKee. It gets him back and forth.
I enjoyed an hour delay on 2173 like 10 days ago.
Yep.
In Moynihan's lovely. It's really. I wish they had chairs. I wish they had the old wooden.
Yep. Here's if you're looking for a fun little afternoon, go to the Hoboken train station. That is old school Europe type open air.
Do trains still go in there?
Absolutely. Open air train station, just like a lot of these European train stations. And they have those
like
long,
Zurich,
long pews, and They keep it in good shape.
We got to get to Michael Barr, and it's important to sell the news, but we need to get an eggnog update. Lisa, do you have the eggnog with your gluten-free, healthy Bloomberg breakfast, or do you keep them separate?
No, you have to keep them separate. Yes,
you have to keep them separate. Okay.
And you have to do a double shot later on.
Thank you for that eggnog liqueur update. With our news in New York City, Michael Barr.
Thank you very much, Tom, Paul, Lisa. We've been talking about it. There have been issues traveling. The latest now, according to what Amtrak is saying, they've canceled 2 Acela trains due to mechanical and equipment issues. They are now being canceled between Washington and Boston. Customers will now have to rebook for the next available service. And as Amtrak is saying, we sincerely apologize for any inconvenience. We'll have more on the latest with the travel problems later. Bethlehem is preparing for another somber Christmas under the shadow of war in Gaza. Ranger Square lacked its usual festive lights and crowds of tourists today. Instead, the area outside the Nativity Church was quiet. The war and the violence in the occupied West Bank, it has spurred the lack of festivities, and it's deeply hurt Bethlehem's economy. Israel is seeking an emergency UN Security Council meeting on the Houthis. Foreign Affairs Minister Gideon Sa'ar says the Yemen-backed rebel group has launched 3 attacks on Israel in recent days, including a drone and 2 ballistic missiles. Meanwhile, there's continued optimism on Israel reaching a ceasefire and a hostage deal with Hamas in Gaza. More on that from Bloomberg News Israel Bureau Chief Ethan Bronner in Tel Aviv.
Right now, the issue is which Palestinian prisoners will be released. Of course, the Israelis want to prevent those with so-called blood on their hand from going, where they would go when they're free, which hostages would get freed in the first part of it. And then there are a series of other issues about how exactly Israeli troops are going to pull back from certain areas and how Palestinians returning to their homes in northern Gaza will be monitored.
Bloomberg's Ethan Bronner in Tel Aviv. Bill Clinton entered a Washington, D.C. hospital after developing a fever. A spokesman for the 78-year-old former president says he remains in good spirits. American astronauts on the International Space Station are sharing holiday wishes. Sonny Williams is one of the astronauts who've been stuck in orbit since June due to problems with Boeing Starlink spacecraft.
It's a great time of year up here. We get to spend it with all of our family up on the International Space Station. There's 7 of us up here, and so we're going to get to enjoy company together.
They look cute, too, because they had Williams and her colleagues donning Santa caps. Global news, 24 hours a day, whenever you want it. With Bloomberg News Now, I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul, Lisa.
Sal, it was 13 minutes ago. Michael Barr with that update. Thank you so much. Due to mechanical and equipment issues, but to the point on American Air where there was radio silence, Amtrak Northeast is the handle, Amtrak NEC alerts, and you can tell that they're really trying to keep people up to date on their train. I mean, this is 43 minutes ago. All services operating between Philadelphia and New York were fully restored. Well, they haven't changed their mind on that, but at least they're communicating.
Yeah. I'll head over to Penn Station a little bit later today.
You taking the ferry today?
No, probably. I'm going to try the trains and get back to the swamps of Jersey. But we'll see. You go at Amtrak on some of these heavy days in Penn Station. My image is young families, lots of kids, huge suitcases going to wherever they're going via Amtrak. And
I have a lot of respect for you guys taking the train because I have to have my car because I want to leave.
It's snowing out now.
Well,
and you're going back to Eastern Ohio.
I did.
Pick up the Subaru.
Yeah, that's saying.
Where you live, is it Cleveland Indians or Pittsburgh Pirates?
That's how far away he is.
No, it's actually it's more Eagles more than anything else.
Yep. But he's up in the mountains of Pennsylvania.
There's
like
deer
elk
in the
and
antelope
deer
play.
and antelope play.
Yeah,
it's
ran
crazy.
across the road yesterday.
Yep.
Yeah, right.
Can your roof take the reindeer and Santa, or is it just they sidle up? We'll have to see. Michael Barr joining us today. It's great to have everybody here. Merry Christmas, happy holidays to you. Bloomberg Surveillance.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And this futures report sponsored by IBKR. Markets never sleep, and neither does Interactive Brokers. Discover opportunities with CME Group futures across equity indices, interest rates, FX, energy, and more. Access CME futures around the clock at Interactive Brokers. Well, you have futures pretty much treading water. This is after Wall Street kicked off the last trading week of the year on the upside. Right now, NASDAQ futures up about 0.2%, 59 points, but Dow futures little change, down 20. S&P futures up 0.1% or 8 points. The 2-year yield at 4.35%, that's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year 4.62%, and that's up 3 basis points. To currencies, the Bloomberg dollar spot index is little change. The Japanese yen little change at 157.18 against the dollar. The euro, little change in the British pound, up about 0.1%. Few companies making news. Starbucks, the barista strike now spread to more than 300 cafes. That's according to its worker union. Over 5,000 workers, cities including Boston, New York, Philadelphia, will join that work stoppage today. And the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, it's suing Walmart and its fintech partner Branch Messenger. They claim they opened expensive bank accounts for delivery drivers without their consent. And finally, Microsoft reportedly trying to lessen its dependence on OpenAI. Sources telling Reuters it's been eyeing internal and third-party AI models to power its Microsoft 365 Copilot. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
That will be a source of study into the new year. Microsoft, what are they doing? There seems to be, everybody's very comfortable talking about Tesla and Apple. And I don't hear much chat about wither Microsoft. And
No.
No. That's something we've got to explore here into the new year. You're going to be here some next week. Can you talk to the interns?
Absolutely.
See
Be
if
all
they
over
can-
that.
I mean, we're
I mean,
short-staffed.
yeah.
I mean, usually we have 5 interns. And we're only down to 2. They live nearby. They don't have to fly in like some of them. We did a lot of equity yesterday. We're doing a lot of yield today because that's the foundation to equity success. Good conversations with Federated Hermes and the Trust Company of the West. Now we go to someone with the Bank of Montreal with an extinguished ability to say price down, yield up. Earl Davis has absolutely nailed it at the Bank of Montreal, BMO Capital Markets. Do you carry that forward, Earl Davis? Do you carry forward steady to higher yields, or can there be a reversal?
Both, actually. We do see the potential of 5% plus yields, but from a fixed income perspective, it starts to make sense to own yield here. And the reason why it does, we look at something called basically your margin of safety in fixed income. So if you own a 10-year bond right now and a corporate bond, and you get 100 basis point backup, you will make that money back in a year because of the higher coupon, covers your mark-to-market loss. That is when fixed income becomes very attractive. So for those reasons, we do believe we'll see a lot of real money come in to buy to start the new year. But the trend is higher, and we do believe we'll see that by the end of 2025, higher yields.
Earl, how much credit risk are you guys thinking about taking in 2025? I mean, you can sit in a 2-year United States Treasury at 4.35%. That seems like a nice living. Why do I need to take credit risk?
The yield's extremely attractive, right? And in regards to, let's say you go into a high yield bond and you earn an 8% coupon on that. You know what? You double your money in basically 9 years. So that's why. And we are very long credit now. We've been buying credit into this backup this month. And the reason why we're long credit is because of the growth mandate of a Trump policies and Trump coming in, we see the risk of default being less in 2025. Additionally, we anticipate there's going to be a lot of international buyers of US dollar assets, of which there's a limited amount of corporate bonds. So we do believe, we do like credit, we do like moving down the yield curve, so more credit risk, high yield. And that's what we're looking for opportunities to do. We think 2025 is going to be a volatile year, but a carry year.
Earl Davis, I was in Toronto 4 lifetimes ago. I think I could shave 1 day a week. Maybe I could get it out to twice a week. And a guy named John Templeton took an interest in me. And I will never forget that Tennessee accent saying to me, Tom, there will be a shortage of bonds. Earl Davis, is there a shortage of corporate paper, and do you predict more issuance to clear out that shortage?
So a few things. There's not a shortage of bonds because there's significant sovereign issuance. But we do believe, given the demand that we would anticipate seeing, international demand, and remember, there's $7 trillion in money market accounts, that at some point they'll probably look at their statements in January and say, oh, wow, great year, overall. This is time, we want to lock in some of those earnings, and you do that by going into bonds. The corporate issuance for 2025, anticipated corporate issuance is large, but it is limited versus the amount of money on the sidelines to buy corporate bonds.
Earl, how do you guys at BMO think about the private credit business? Is that a place you want to have exposure?
That's a great question. I go back to the question you asked me with 2-year bonds earning 4.35. Why would you go into corporate? I feel the exact same way with corporate bonds. With corporate bonds yielding, depending on where you are, 5 to 8%, there's no need from our perspective to go into as much private. And the reason why is we're not worried about 2025, but liquidity is always something you have to take into account and ensure that you're getting paid for. 2026 may be, from a liquidity perspective, a more challenging year. We don't anticipate it next year, but we don't see the need to move out from high yield. We'll go as far as high yield bond. No need to move out into privates, given where yields are.
Earl, how do you think about U.S. fixed income markets versus non-U.S. fixed income markets? Value, return opportunities?
We love it, and we love it for 2 reasons. One is where the yields are now, and it will be volatile, and we do anticipate them going higher, but they also will go lower. And the other reason that we didn't talk about is a strong U.S. dollar policy means people want to buy U.S. dollar assets. So they'll go into equities and they'll go into fixed income. We think there's going to be a lot of background demand for it, for fixed income in the U.S., and that's why we like these yields. It's supportive. We could see a test of 5%, but been in this market 30 years, and I know one thing: nothing goes in a straight line forever. So that's how we look at it from an active manager perspective. And at these levels, it starts making sense to stick your toe into corporates and to duration.
Earl Davis, thank you so much at BMO Capital Markets. Love that we did this. Our interns had a great lineup of 3 fixed income voices back to back there. We like that a lot. This 8 minutes ago, again, I can't say the difference between American Airlines and what Amtrak's doing. This is Amtrak Northeast. Their alert Twitter feed 8 minutes ago, they're replying to a mere mortal. Hello, Wayne. Acela trains 2154 and 2173 now canceled between Washington and Boston. Customers will now rebook to the next available service. We sincerely apologize for any convenience. At least they're doing that.
Yep. The social media game is strong. I can also say New Jersey Transit's got a pretty good social media game when something's up. Their apps are pretty accurate and kind of see what's happening.
Over the holidays, should I buy my first odd lot of shares?
Oh, I think so.
I
Jump
missed
right
the
in.
Ben Laidler bull market.
Start the year strong. Take some risk.
And that's what John Stolfus says.
Yeah, I know.
Folks, on radio and television worldwide, coming up, without question, the single most important equity discussion of the season. John Stolfus at OPCO, their chief investment strategist, has steadfastly said, stay in this market and participate. Ebbs and flows of bullishness, Paul.
Yep.
But he's got that jarring extrapolation out to SPX 7100.
Nice.
On the break here, I'll interpolate the extrapolate and give you a Dow equivalent on that. I don't know what it is. I'll have to do the math.
No, but that's solid.
Out.
He's also a guitarist who plays country music
really
at a professional level.
Yeah, he's not, he's not like,
So if this whole economics thing or market thing doesn't work
out. Or the
out,
Buffalo roam, he's not doing that. He's
okay.
like, Stolfus is actually killing it. It's the holiday season. You play Andy Williams. Lisa goes, that was just phenomenal. Can you give me Bob? I said, Bob who? She said, Bob Goulet. Good morning.
My wishes at last have come true because this Christmas I spent
This is Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney.
What do you say to people scared stiff in cash?
We've got an administration, presumably, that will be pro-business, lower taxes.
With Lisa Mateo on markets.
AI affecting demand for cloud computing.
And Michael Barr with news.
U.S. Secretary of State discussed the conflict in Gaza.
The best in economics, finance, investment, and international relations. This is Bloomberg Surveillance on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Tom Keene, Paul Sweeney, Michael Barr, Lisa Mateo. We welcome all of you on radio across this nation, around the world. Good morning on Bloomberg Television as well. A great lineup here. Let me get the surveillance list out. We've been audibling this to the 8 o'clock hour. Gautam Mukunda will join us on your Washington, what you'll see in January. Sweeney had a tantrum. Ann Miletti, get her on, out of Milwaukee in the 9 o'clock hour, I should say. Ann Miletti here on Value Forward. Our most popular guest, Kona Hake, is #1 in the world on why is a Starbucks latte mocha, cappuccino, whatever, $9. She's exquisite on what are called the soft commodities, and we start strong. In moments, John Stolfus will be with us with OPCO. Really looking forward to his bullishness. It is like nothing on the street. He gets you out to Dow. 50,000. Right now, well, red and green on the screen. I mean, what are there, 12 people on Wall Street? We shut down early today.
Exactly.
Why are we here?
We're always here, but we're here every day. None of this hybrid stuff. We come in every day, Tom, but the equity markets close at 1 p.m. Wall Street time, the bond market 2 p.m.
Katie Greifeld said, Tom, global TV and radio, you got to quote BitDog.
Okay.
96,000. Yeah, 96,000. Up $2,000 today in Bitcoin. Where was it like,
we were 107,000 probably like a week and a half ago.
But
it's a pullback.
Where was it a year ago? Like
well, how about just
30-ish?
before the election? It was like 50, 60,000 right before the election.
That's all the Bitcoin we're doing today, folks. So we'll move forward. Futures up 12 as well. Let's get right to it. Every word with John Stolfus matters. From the Interactive Broker Studios, our Bloomberg Business Flash, Lisa Mateo.
And I was going to lead with Bitcoin. You killed it there, Tom. Good morning. We got futures mix, and this is on this holiday shortened trading day. NASDAQ futures up 0.4%, 85 points. Dow futures, little change, down about 7. S&P futures up 0.2% or 12 points. We have the 2-year yield at 4.35%. That's up 1 basis point. The yield on the 10-year, 4.62%, and that's up 3 basis points. To currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little change. The Japanese yen at 157.25 against the dollar. The euro, little change, with the British pound up about 0.2%. And yes, Bitcoin up above 95,000. Shares of Honda soared 12% in Asia as its announcement of a $7 billion stock buyback, kind of offsetting concerns about its plans to acquire Nissan. Nissan rose about 6%. A U.S. national security panel that has deadlocked on the sale of U.S. Steel to Nippon Steel, and that's leaving that final decision to President Joe Biden, who actually has been opposed to the deal. We have U.S. Steel down about 0.5%. Nippon Steel rose nearly 1%. And shares of American Airlines, they are on the mend. They were down as much as 4% this morning. Right now, they're down nearly 1%, and that's after that nationwide ground stop was canceled after a technical issue. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Lisa, thanks so much. Without question, our equity discussion of the day, some would say of 2024. I mentioned Ben Laidler, then with HSBC, now with Bradesco. Ben Laidler 6 years ago on this Christmas Eve saying, get on board equities for the future. A great bull market call. Ed Yardeni, Ralph Ancampora, October of 2022. And now John Stolfus saying you've got to participate in the market. He is with OPCO, and the message is simple. We remain positive on equities. The broad rotation is begun, evidenced day to day, week to week. Get on board equities. John Stolfus, you're out. SPX 7,000. I interpolate that to a Dow Jones Industrial Average of 50,000. What do the bears get wrong?
Great to be on the show this morning, Tom. Merry Christmas. First thing, I've got to say that I think the Bears got it wrong and that they thought the Fed was going to blow up the economy, push us into a recession with the rate hike cycle that they started in March 22. Instead, the Fed was very sensitive in exercising its dual mandate. Then the Bears really bid wrong on the consumer. we always say don't bet against the American consumer. The consumer discretionary, by the way, is the best performing S&P 500 index since August 5th, which was the summer low, that's when the market had that pullback of around 8%.
On Bloomberg Television, on Bloomberg Radio, we have a massive problem here. John Stolfus, perfect backdrop of a New York City that looks gorgeous, means he's in Turks and Caicos after his year. Yeah. Let's go on Bloomberg Television on YouTube worldwide. It is a winter wonderland in John Stolfus's New York City. The backdrop, I mean, it's just not working today, is it?
No, who knows where John is today, but I'm guessing someplace warm. Hey, John, we've had 2 years of north of 20% returns in the stock market here. What does your gut tell you about 2025 here?
Well, you know what we did when we put in this, we have a 7,100 target for 2025, and our gut told us that essentially the fundamentals remain good. The resilience, whether it's resilience in jobs, even though things have slowed, the pace has slowed in terms of job growth, but you've got resilience in jobs, resilience in corporate earnings based on the S&P 500 last few quarters. And you've got a consumer that remains resilient as well. Perhaps sometimes it's discount shopping or it's private label. But if anything, just becoming a more astute buyer, and they've always been astute when things slow down. When things are going fast in the economy, of course, they spend like sailors who've been on a long term of duty, and then have a shore leave all of a sudden. But the consumer has come through. So it's essentially the Fed. They got the direction of the consumer wrong. And I think overall the case was they really thought that even with the slowing being relatively soft in the economy, that things were going to be worse than they are, and the earnings persisted remarkably good.
John, using my trusty HP 12C, I see a 7,100 S&P is about an 18% return from current levels. How much of that is earnings driven versus multiple driven?
We think it's a combination of the two, but the more significant, the horse that'll move it is the earnings. We think earnings are likely to continue to improve in 2025. But the multiple then, there are more people buying stocks today than there have been in other bull markets with serious concerns and needs. It's not just fear and greed. You got the best 5 stocks. You got a hot tip. People are looking to, in anticipation, younger generations, seeing that Social Security is not likely to be the resource it was for their great-grandparents or grandparents, less so for their parents. And for the boomers, the biggest risk for the boomers is the concern is one might live longer than one would like. So you need to invest more in equities that have better growth trajectories from a historical standpoint. And in that, be able to hopefully keep your standard of living in golden years, so to speak.
John, talk about the free cash flow and free cash flow growth of the Mag 7. The concentration is extraordinary. Identify OPCO's analysis of their continued free cash flow growth.
Well, I would defer that to our analysts, but as a strategist, I'll take a stab at it. I think the free cash flow growth for the Mag 7 is sourced from the fact that both business and the consumer have technology deeply embedded in their lifespans. And as a result of that, we're all on the upgrade cycle. There's a big name in smartphones, as we all know, that has the latest version, and the one just before it are the only phones that they have with the chip you need to do AI on their phones. That's big stuff, and it happens with the other companies. It's related to home appliances, factory equipment, robotics, the need to advance the electric grid. Both alternative and traditional fuels, aerospace, defense, it goes on and on. This is just one of those periods. It looks to us very much like that period, and we weren't around for that time, but we've read about it enough. We love automobiles. Probably akin to or parallel to after the period where Henry Ford had automated the assembly line, and suddenly he brought down the price, raised the quality overall with increased production, with automation, and changed the way everybody lived. And we are on an upgrade cycle.
Tim Cook is the new Henry Ford. We continue now with John Stolfus on Bloomberg Television and Bloomberg Radio Worldwide. We welcome all of you into the holiday season and on this Christmas Eve with futures advancing, futures up 13. Paul Sweeney?
John, you mentioned kind of just the advent of the assembly line back in the day. Is AI the new assembly line technology for the next how many years for
What are you,
investors?
Dan Ives?
Exactly.
It may very well be, or at least it's part and parcel of a suite of things that are AI, software, hardware, a variety of things that are now looking to become produce greater efficiencies for both business and the consumer. We also would have to think that when you look at this type of a period, it is disruptive, but essentially what we're looking for are sharper picks and shovels, virtual picks and shovels is what you're looking at, to dig through all that data that we produce on a regular basis, whether it's for healthcare professionals, whether it's for financial professionals, whether it's for people in the utilities business to produce greater efficiencies in gaining increases in electricity production. It's on all 11 sectors. It's not just about the Mag 7, which we believe will share the stage with the other four sectors.
John Stolfus, nobody cares. We don't care about SPX 7000. We don't care about Dow Jones 51,000. David Gurr is listening, and he emails in and he says, ask John what's going to be under the tree this year. Are you looking at the $10,000 Martin D45, or are you springing after your year for the Joe Bonamassa 00045 at 20,000?
Wow.
When it comes to buying more guitars, it's not on my list this year. My daughter's going to law school. What can I tell you? Law school is more important than buying another guitar.
Law school or guitar? I don't know.
Did you just hear what he said? Yeah. All right, Joe, you're telling me John, you're telling me tuition is more important than the marginal guitar?
I'm afraid so. I think, at this point, having played guitar now for well over 5 decades, it's it's enough is enough. It's I've got what I need, and we just played a gig at Patty Riley's on 29th Street and 2nd Avenue the other night, and we draw a good crowd. I was using a Fender a custom shop Strat, and it sounded just fine to me.
Great, no one left sober. John Stolfus, thank you so much. With OPCO, without question, the equity strategist of the year, and his optimism forward into the American market. On television and radio, a data check in order. Futures up 15. They advance in the last 20 minutes with the VIX 19 level yesterday into a bull market 16.75. I'm looking at the 10-year real yield 2.27%, elevating there. That's a real point of interest to me. Trust Company of the West telling us earlier they're watching that closely. Sweeney on the dollar, DXY a 108, euro, right on the cusp, as they say, a 103.99. We're out on YouTube. Subscribe to Bloomberg Podcasts, and of course on your commute across the nation. Good morning, 99.1 FM in a balmy Washington, D.C. It's Bloomberg Surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, we got futures in the green, and this is after the Nasdaq led the indexes higher yesterday, thanks to shares of chip makers like NVIDIA, AMD, Broadcom. This was after President Biden announced an investigation into Chinese chip makers. So we'll check in with him now. We have NVIDIA up about 0.5%, Advanced Micro Devices up more than 2%, Broadcom same there, more than 2%. We have Nasdaq futures up 0.3%, 80 points. Dow futures little changed, up 15. S&P futures up 0.2%. 4.13. The 2-year yield at 4.35%. That's little changed. And the yield on the 10-year, 4.62%. And that's up 3 basis points. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little changed. Few companies making news. We'll start with Starbucks. Its barista strike now spreading to more than 300 cafes. That's according to its workers union. We're talking about over 5,000 workers in cities spanning Boston, New York, Philadelphia. They will join that work stoppage today. And sticking with labor issues, we go on to Amazon. Workers in its North Carolina warehouse filed a petition for a union election, and that warehouse has about 4,300 employees. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now. Wherever you get your podcasts, I'm Lisa Mateo. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa, thanks so much. Out of LinkedIn this morning, Peter Orszag, one of our great academics, LSE bred in London, and of course now holding court with a shingle out at Lazard, but actually doing some real public policy work, highlights Robert Rubin's essay in the New York Times. I'll get this out on Twitter and out on LinkedIn. It's been such a busy morning. I'll blame American Airlines. Mr. Rubin, who has a huge influence on Mr. Orszag, and I also point out myself, he's 86 years old. He will forever be incredibly healthy, 62 years old. Sure. And Bob Rubin, our former Secretary of Treasury, changed how we speak on global Wall Street. And the one word I associate with Robert Rubin and his management of risk at Goldman Sachs was the word likelihood. When you hear fancy people, Paul, to me in the modern day, talk about likelihood, that comes from Robert Rubin. Okay. He changed how we look at risk on Wall Street. Thank you, Peter Orszag, for mentioning that. I'll get that out on Twitter and LinkedIn for holiday and weekend reading as well. On the likelihood of your next cup of Sanka, Kona Hake joins us now with EDF and Man. We have her back here amid cocoa up, Sanka up, coffee up, everything else in the softs is up. Let's start there, Kona Hake. Is there a correlation here? Are the softs, the agriculturals, cocoa, coffee, are they all up for the same reason?
Actually the same reason, but there's definitely something that links the two, and that would be arguably climate change. They are all soft commodities that are traded in produced in tropical countries, and tropical countries are more vulnerable to climate change than, say, the temperate countries. So yes, we've had excessive drought in Brazil, which is the biggest producer of coffee. You've had droughts in Vietnam, Southeast Asia, another tropical country, right. And for cocoa, you've had Ivory Coast and Ghana, who've also suffered from dry weather and damp weather, which causes diseases. So it's a combination of weather, but there are also nuances within the supply-demand balances.
Elasticity, Peter Orszag taught me, is responsiveness. So if Lisa Mateo gets an extra caramel venti white mocha at Starbucks, $9 right now, top ticking, do we start drinking less coffee? Do we start chewing less chocolate?
The wholesale prices have fallen. Obviously, the futures have. Those prices have obviously gone through the roof. It's now a question of those. The roasters and the cocoa chocolate producers to now pass those on. We've been seeing drip passing through at the retail level. I believe in 2025, you're going to see much more pass through of these high commodity prices. Then you're going to start feeling the pinch. The average consumer today, it's not hurting them. The price increases have not been enough to curtail demand. But as we go into 2025, we do believe that the price hikes are going to lead to some, not necessarily destruction in demand, but certainly some double thinking. Do I really need that extra coffee? Do I need that extra bar of chocolate? I think that's what's going to happen.
Kona Hake goes to the heart of the matter. We go to our coffee expert, Lisa Mateo here. At the Mateo household, Lisa, does a $15 Starbucks slow down the demand?
It doesn't, because the daughter has the Apple Pay and it just goes on no matter what.
It just goes on. Thank you, Tim Cook, for that morsel. Paul, say the interview.
Kona, how about some of these grains and oilseeds here? Corn, I'm looking at some of these corn and meal and wheat and so on, seeing double-digit declines across the board here. It's the GLCO function on the Bloomberg terminal. How are farmers doing out there? Because I see double-digit declines in some of these soft commodities here.
Yeah, so the grains and the oilseeds, they've not had as good a run anywhere near like the softs had. So yeah, we basically started to see an oversupply situation, which have led prices to collapse. I think the potential tariffs that Trump is planning against China and Mexico, I think that could also impact demand for oilseeds. Certainly, soybean exports out of the USA to China would be severely impacted. So all of this is causing futures markets to fall. There's ample inventory around the world, and you're right, farmers are suffering. For certainly some of the corn farmers, I would argue that their cost of production are being nearly approached. That's not great, and I think that's being reflected by profitability at some of these US farmers for sure. And then the EU farmers, they're also burdened with additional legislation like the Green Deal, so much restriction on what fertilizers can be applied. There's not a level playing field. Their costs of production are getting higher because everyone wants more greenery applied to EU farming. So farmers are going through a bit of a rough time, certainly in the grains and the oilseeds commodities for sure.
Kodak, one final question. With great respect to what you've done at EDF and Man, just driving our study of this. This year, for some reason, I was looking at Darjeeling tea in Nepal.
Oh boy!
And how the farmers at the end of the day make barely anything. Kona, why do coffee makers in Brazil, the farmers, or in Vietnam, why are they so impoverished? Is there a policy that's affecting that, or is it just the human condition that the farmers of all this wonderful stuff we use make next to nothing?
So I think that case is definitely true for cocoa in Ivory Coast and Ghana, where the farmers who produce that stuff, they don't get nearly as much as the prices we're seeing in the futures market. The middlemen tend to take a lot of that. The whole supply chain in the middle side of it, that's where a lot of the margins get absorbed, and the poor farmer at the beginning does not. In coffee, I would say the Brazilian farmers and the Vietnamese farmers, they're probably better capitalized. I think the prices that they can gain is a lot more transparent, and then they do seem to be capturing a bit more of the margin compared to the cocoa producers. So I think there's room for improvement for sure in the cocoa industry, whereas the farmers in Brazil and in Vietnam for coffee, I think they are very highly incentivized today to produce more because they are seeing the returns. But Ivory Coast, they're not.
Right. Kona, this has been a joy. It seems like we're having you on every 2 weeks. We have to do it again here early January. Kona Hake, on what we care about, the cup of coffee that you get out there that you make at home, and of course in chocolate as well. The softs as well. Meal. I didn't know meal is a thing.
Yeah. Rapeseed meal is down 26% yield.
Rapeseed meal.
That's what it's called. But cocoa is up 176% year to date, and coffee up 73% year to date.
Lining up to get the markets open here on Bloomberg Television and Bloomberg Radio. John Stolfus just with us, really with an exceptional persistence of a bull market. Your levels this morning on the close yesterday, 43,000 Dow, 6,000 SPX, 21,500 NASDAQ 100. And I guess, are we on the 4 trillion Apple Watch?
I think we are.
Greifeld's in charge of that.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know what Katie says.
Yeah, she's.
Are we close enough to be?
We are very close. 3.86 trillion market cap. For
264 is a price. Somebody had that
we're 255 right now. So making up 32% year to date for our friends.
Now we're not talking to Dan Ives the rest of the year, right?
I don't think so.
He's like done.
Yeah, who knows?
Until Penn State loses.
Yeah, exactly.
Something like that.
Yep, big game coming.
Please stay with us here on Bloomberg Television and Bloomberg Radio. Lisa Mateo, Michael Barr, Paul Sweeney, and myself, getting you to the market opening on this holiday season, this Christmas Eve from New York City. Good morning.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo alongside Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney with your opening bell report. So how are the markets going to open on this holiday shortened day? This is after a rally, and some of the world's largest tech companies really gave the benchmarks a nice boost yesterday. Shares of chip makers like NVIDIA, AMD, Qualcomm, they also had a great day yesterday. So we're off and running. Let's get right to it. We'll start with the S&P 500 up about 0.1%, 9 points at 5,983. We have the Dow, little change up about 14 points at 42,921. And finally, the NASDAQ up about 0.2%, 53 points at 19,816. The 2-year yield at 4.35%, that's little changed. And the yield on the 10-year, 4.62%, and that's up about 3 basis points. We have Brent crude, $73 a barrel. That's up more than 1%. WTI crude, $70 a barrel. Spot gold up about 0.1% at $2,616 an ounce. And the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is little changed. Since we mentioned chip makers earlier, we'll check in with NVIDIA right now, up about 0.1%. AMD up more than 1%, and Qualcomm up about 0.3%. That is your Bloomberg opening bell report. Paul and Tom.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. We welcome all of you worldwide on Bloomberg Television and Bloomberg Radio. We'll monitor the markets for you. For those in the East Coast of the corridor, good morning, 99.1 FM in Washington, up to Bloomberg 11.30, and of course up to Boston, 92.9. Acela challenge. Paul, am I right? There's been 2 trains that have been like, it's not going to happen.
They run, they got at least a train every hour going. So, if you miss one,
you say.
You miss one, we'll just take the next one.
So winter wonderland, it's a little cleared up a little bit in New York. It's always important to have worse weather in Milwaukee.
Yep.
We do that now. Dan Miletti of Allspring Global Investments, head of equity, where winter is really winter. And I really want to talk about the future of value investing. I know Allspring is a venerable, I think of John Kerry at Pioneer, or I mentioned John Templeton earlier with his measurement of the Templeton Global Growth Fund years ago. What's the future look like of value investing for Ann Miletti as you shift to the ETF world?
It's a great question, Tom. Thanks for having me on, and Merry Christmas to you and Paul. Look, I think that I like underdogs, not just the Green Bay Packers. I also like small and mid cap here. And I think when we look toward the future, that's where I really see the most value. Certainly those indexes have more financials in them and more cyclical names, but they also have some very profitable companies that have been kind of just ignored by the rest of the market as this Mag 7 area has really taken off.
I mentioned John Kerry, and back at Pioneer of Boston to the Phil Carret era, you'd have a value fund with 100, 150, dare I say 200 stocks. Are you less diversified now in trying to succeed at value versus owning 4 growth stocks?
Yeah, I think we're focused on trying to get investors to think more about diversification. Now, we still are really cautious. You don't want to be everywhere in this market, but there are some really high quality companies out there. And one of the things, I followed small and mid cap stocks for most of my career, which is dating me much longer than I want right now. But what people often associate with small cap companies with is that they're unprofitable. But there's a lot of small and mid cap companies that are quite profitable. And when you look at the earnings multiples of those companies versus the S&P 500, they are almost at trough levels. And so it's those types of companies, Tom, cash flow positive, in many cases, earnings positives, really good management teams operating these companies, but just can't get out of their own way. So diversification, but looking for high quality still.
And I know you and your teams at Allspring, you do a lot of real bottoms-up research analysis. Are there sectors that screen well for you guys in that small to mid-cap world?
Yeah, there definitely are, Paul, and we have seen financials start to outperform. That is one of the areas that our managers were highlighting earlier. Certainly with rates coming down, other pressures coming off that area, and not just the banks, but more broadly other financials as well. But I would also say healthcare, and this is an area that a lot of the market has been kind of scared away from. But the tools and diagnostic space in particular is an area that has been underutilized, where you see earnings expected to really ramp in 25 and 26. And so where you see that earnings acceleration, that can actually bring really good returns for shareholders as well.
We get lucky, as we did yesterday with Dana Telsey on Nordstrom's going private. We have Miletti with us from Allspring and Strong in Milwaukee. And this is Joshua Franklin in the Financial Times pretty much moments ago. This was rumored, and now the FT reports the U.S. Banking Lobby Group has said they filed a lawsuit against the Fed over the central bank's stress testing. And of course, the quote here from Greg Baer, we appreciate the board's announcement as a first step towards transparency. Are we beyond stress tests, and Miletti? When you look, I mean, I get JP Morgan's wonderful, but come on. If you look at the top 20 banks after what we went through 18 months ago, can we really get beyond stress tests? That's a mouthful. Stress tests of our banking lobby?
You know, Tom, this is a really interesting article and a comment as well. As you know, where have we seen concentration grow? It's with banks. And there may be more risk out there longer term than less. But I think others would point to private credit and private equity soaking up some of the slack on the other ends, and those areas also funding many businesses. But I don't know. We'll have to see what happens with that lawsuit.
Hey, and a lot of folks with the new Trump administration coming in are expecting M&A to really pick up. Is that something you guys thematically think about for 2025 and maybe beyond?
Absolutely. I think we're already starting to see it. You know, the IPO market is starting to show signs of opening up, but I think M&A is real. There, you know, as you both know, company balance sheets are strong. There's a lot of cash on the sidelines when it comes to what companies have been kind of holding out, waiting to see what the future looks like. With a lower regulatory environment, with rates continuing to come down, maybe not as low as people expected, that's a good environment for M&A. It's another reason we like that small and mid-cap space. You know, these names are kind of ripe and valuations are attractive. And so I think M&A will heat up. It will be a theme into 25.
You know, Paul Sweeney, I look at, we mentioned Ben Laidler on Christmas Eve 2018 with his great bull market call at the time at HSBC. I think I set it up 154%. I can't remember the number, folks, but I got JP Morgan from that same holiday season 6 years ago. Fortress Diamond is up 161%, 17% per year.
Solid.
I thought banks made nominal GDP and you went home.
No,
wow.
Great returns. And they're building a phenomenal headquarters on Park Avenue, which I can't wait to see. Hey, and one of the things I'm trying to figure out where the performance in 2025 could come from after two just stellar years of north of 20% returns. I feel like it's got to be driven by earnings. And sure enough, you know, the earnings growth out there is 12 to 14%. But boy, that seems pretty high. Is there earnings risk out there for you guys? Are you thinking about that?
Paul, I agree with you. It seems high. I would have probably said that coming into last year, or this past year, but we didn't see tremendous earnings growth outside of, you know, a real concentrated number of names. This year, I think we need to see real earnings growth in order to get the market to accelerate. But, you know, the equity market will continue to surprise. I looked at some data going back to 1926, so 99 years. 71 of those years, if we can count this year, which hopefully we can, have produced positive returns, 71 of 96 years. And 32 of those years have produced returns of over 20%. 5 years in a row of 20% earnings. Paul, you will remember this. This was in the fun times of TMT for both of us. 95, 96, 97, 98, and 99 were all plus 20%. So, you know, you'll never know. Maybe we can get 3 this time around.
Miletti, is Apple a value stock?
Tom, the way I love to think about this is value is what you gain, not what you pay. And so I think it all depends on what you paid for Apple and how much more gain we can get. I'm going to use the old Buffett phrase for that one.
Didn't you mention, Paul, like this year? I need to buy my
Apple's
first
up
share.
33%, Tom.
33% this year?
Look at
I
that.
thought they were doing terrible. It's like Tim
China.
Cook. It's terrible. Stop the Road show. Remember the developer shows?
Yeah, they still have them. They're still big events.
So is this like a home run for Dan Ives?
He's had a lot of home runs this year. He can be sitting back
He'll
with
be
his
insufferable.
ugly clothing that he tends to wear or loud clothing that he tends to wear.
Oh, listen to
It works
you.
for him. I know. I'm all over him on that. But he's a Penn State fan, so we forgive him.
Okay.
So there you go.
Miletti on value. Let us continue. A couple more questions here. We're on television and radio worldwide. Miletti, I go back to value, and on an international basis, the number one failure has been strong dollar, resilient dollar, international stocks. At some point, it's going to be a moonshot. When is that?
Tom, I think if we had to pick a dark horse going into 25 and 26, we'd probably take a shot at having some allocation toward emerging markets. And it's exactly, what you're pointing out. The dollar has been so strong. It's really pushed back emerging markets, on top of other things. But I think there is real value to be had when you look at the MSCI EM and index versus the S&P 500. We're at a 20-year trough. And so any kind of positive surprise or weakness in the dollar could really cause that area of the market to surge.
Okay, Miletti, thank you so much. Have a wonderful season. Merry Christmas to you. Miletti is at Allspring in Milwaukee. We've been doing this, and we're committed to doing more of this next year, where we will have not one but two guests from one shop.
Yep.
Or we'll have two people that cover the same thing from two different shops. It takes a lot more work than you think because everybody's schedules are so crazy. But boy, do we finish strong, or I should say start strong in 2025. This is the Nathan Hager, Karen Moscow extravaganza. Bloomberg Daybreak, the first of the year. Ives and Munster will recapitulate.
Yep.
2024. And do you think we'll be $4 trillion by the time that shows up?
Could very well be. I mean, boy, it's such a move. But we had Dan Ives and Gene Munster, two of the leading voices on technology in our studio recently, and just kind of going through all the big names, the Mag 7, the AI trends, the electric vehicle trends. I mean, some of the big issues, Tom, driving these markets.
Apple up a stick, and I got market cap. You can do this, folks, in the Bloomberg Professional Service. The DES screen. Michael Barr uses it daily. The market cap is $3.88 trillion.
Yeah.
Greifeld says we got to get to 3.9 trillion, then we're on the 4 trillion watch.
Boom, on it.
We'll
So
have to see. Up $1.33 right now.
Yep. So it's good. I mean, you think about Apple, it's a combination of new products. What do they got for you? I upgraded to the iPhone 16 Pro, so I'm now with all the cool kids.
Did you?
Yep, exactly.
You made the upgrade?
I made the upgrade. And then it's about services, Tom. I mean, all the services they generate off of all the devices that we have, they make a very good profit.
All the stars just aligned. For those of you that don't know this, John Tucker has the phone that Michael Douglas used in that movie
Wall
30
Street.
years ago. Like it looks like a
Money never
lady's
sleeps.
purse.
Yep.
Is Tucker not in the last few days because he's trying to get into the Apple store for the upgrade?
On Fifth Avenue, he's trying to
Could
get
be he's
in.
over on Fifth Avenue?
Yep, trying to get in.
We'll
He's
have
going to
see.
upgrade.
We have a winter wonderland here in New York. As we go to Ari, can you give me the look of New York City? This is Billionaires Row. From Liz Ann Saunders Schwab, this is from her patio. This is Billionaires Row looking across 57th Street and Central Park South over, I'm sorry, it's the Time Warner Center?
I'm still calling it the Time Warner
Is
Center.
it, Lizetti goes nuts.
I know.
The Deutsche Bank Center?
I don't know. Over there. Great. 59th.
Anyways, we hope you are having a winter wonderland. Seriously, good morning to those stuck in airline traffic. From New York City, Bloomberg's surveillance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg Television, and the Bloomberg Business app. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, I'm Lisa Mateo. Well, a pretty quiet session ahead of the Christmas holiday. Don't forget, stock trading closes at 1 p.m. Wall Street time. Bond markets at 2 p.m. Right now, the Nasdaq up 0.6%, 118 points. The Dow little changed, up about 3, and the S&P 500 up 0.3%, up about 21 points. The 2-year yield 4.35%. That's little change, and the yield on the 10-year 4.62%, and that's up about 3 basis points. To currencies, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index. That's little change. We have the Japanese yen, little change at 157.24 against the dollar. The euro, little change at 104.08 against the dollar. The British pound up about 0.2%, and we have Bitcoin up 3% at just over 96,000. A few stocks we want to check in with. U.S. Steel are now up 0.7%, and this is after a U.S. National Security Panel had deadlocked on the sale of U.S. Steel to Nippon Steel, leaving that final decision to President Joe Biden. Nippon Steel rose nearly 1%, and shares of American Airlines, well, they're down about 1% right now, and this is after flights resume following that brief grounding from a technical issue that affected all U.S. routes on Christmas Eve. And speaking of the holidays, are you ready for horror on Christmas Day? Yes, the Nosferatu, the movie, hits theaters tomorrow. Experts say it's going to break the Dracula box office curse because this one is a scarier take.
Is The Rock in it?
Film. He is not, so I will not be going to see this.
Very good.
It does come out Christmas Day. That is your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Tom.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene with you. Michael Barr and Lisa Mateo always helping out on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television worldwide. Don't forget YouTube, our new distribution. Somebody says, Tom, what do you want? I got enough bow ties. Just subscribe to Bloomberg Podcast. That's the best way to roll here. The Hermes bow ties, they just go up, and away.
Do they?
Yeah, they used to be like, it was like 2 martinis, and now it's more.
But you have you got to go there, though. It's worth the investment.
Up and away. We're going to spend some time here on the politics of the moment. There's no one better to do that with than Gautam Mukunda. Yes, a professor at Yale School of Management, but far more, his book, Picking Presidents, really alludes to the follow-up, I'm kidding, in jest, Picking Billionaires. Gautam Mukunda now on Elon Musk into 2025. Professor, thank you so much for joining. And one of your side notes, you say the tension within the Trump administration of Secretary of State Rubio and the newly minted Elbridge Colby versus business types that need to do business in Shanghai like Musk is tangible. Is that what we need to look forward to as a raging Chinese debate at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue?
It's hard to see how that won't happen. I mean, the big chunk of the Trump administration is people who have defined their foreign policy stance around conflict with China, hopefully not armed, but still levels of hostility that are just a new part of the relationship. And some of the major players in the Trump administration, Elon Musk in particular, more than anyone else, are enormously dependent on trade with China. Musk wants to put billions of dollars of investment into China, and most of Tesla's profits seem to come from China. It's hard to see how those two won't be at loggerheads.
What do you think? How do you think this is going to play out here? I mean, I think a lot of folks in Washington, D.C., a lot of folks who think about policy matters for this incoming administration are trying to figure out what role Elon Musk is going to play and for how long. Do you have any insight into that?
So this is something new in American politics. There has never been a civilian as powerful as Elon Musk. In American history, it's hard to find anyone in sort of like British history or anyone who's comparable. If we go through, he's not just the wealthiest person in the world and maybe the single most important media figure. He's also America's single most irreplaceable defense contractor, right? You could swap out Boeing for Lockheed Martin. You couldn't swap out SpaceX for anyone. So that level of stature is just astonishing and hard to, I mean, he would be a major player in any government. But at the same time, he's sort of shown a willingness to kind of conduct his own foreign policy. He appears to speak with Vladimir Putin on a regular basis and then turns around and kind of tweets out stuff that looks a lot like Russian propaganda. He has enormous financial interests in China that swamp, they may be larger financial interests in China than those of any other person in the United States.
Yep.
And so at the same time, if you're Marco Rubio or Bridge Colby, I mean, what you've been talking about for 10 years is we need to prepare against China. And I'll just note right now in the sort of the conflict over the government shutdown, the most interesting thing that happened was the initial bill was killed because of Musk. The bill that finally passed did not address any of Musk's concerns with the original bill. If anything, it was worse by his standards, by the ways he was measuring it. But the big change was it stripped out the clause that prevented Americans from making significant investments in China and sort of advanced Chinese manufacturing. That was gone, and somehow the bill passed the second time, which suggests that maybe Musk got exactly what he wanted.
So what are some of the takeaways from that funding bill practice that we saw a week or so ago? It seems like maybe Congress, in particular the Senate, kind of trying to assert its independence of its branch of government. Does that suggest how maybe these first 100 days will go for the Trump administration?
It does, and I think what it suggests is that senators and congressmen are realizing that however much Americans might admire Elon Musk's business success, they didn't elect him to run the country. And, no matter how, there's been some focus groups where even hardcore Trump supporters are sort of looking at Musk's role and going, we did not vote for this guy. So it's not clear what's going on here. But what I would draw back on is I think American politics look more like court politics right now than they do traditional politics. I keep drawing on sort of stuff from the Roman Empire and the Byzantine Empire, because this is about clashes of personalities. So the person who springs to mind for me for Elon Musk is Crassus, the richest of all the Romans, the figure who was in the first triumvirate with Pompey and Caesar. I mean, he was a crucial figure in the transition of the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire. And Crassus he bankrolled other people and he played an enormous role behind the scenes. It was incredibly powerful until he decided that he wanted to rule himself directly. And while he had incredible financial skills and incredible sort of backroom maneuvering skills, that was not his skill set. He was not a successful role. He was not a successful politician. And it ended very poorly for Crassus.
Professor, we're weaned on, you get this in history. March 2nd, 1861, Lincoln's first inauguration. And I'm sure they had a whole frenzy about pecking order, about who would sit where and all that. Where should Elon Musk sit at the second inauguration of Donald Trump?
I mean, judging by his level of influence, he should be right up on stage.
Holding the Bible?
I mean, with his hand right on Trump's shoulder as the
No, but come on, this is going to be seriously. Is he on stage? Does he sit 2 rows behind President Biden? Is he out in the cheap seats? Halfway back to the Lincoln Memorial. Which is it?
So here's the thing: I would never underestimate Musk's savvy, right? He spent $250 million to make himself the second most powerful person in the United States. So if I were giving Musk advice, I would tell him he should be so far away the cameras can't find him on Zoom. That was the smart play for him, is to be as low key as possible, and the Trump people should think the same thing. But I wonder, Musk, like Trump, likes to be the main character, and it's a little hard for me to imagine him yielding focus to quite that extent.
Professor, thank you so much. Gautam Mukunda has been a huge, huge advantage for Bloomberg surveillance this year. We greatly appreciate his efforts. Readable and advanced. Picking Presidents is the book. Really, really quite something as well. We wander forward here on Bloomberg Television and Bloomberg Radio into the holiday season. I've never seen a season, Paul Sweeney, where there's been less discussion. What are consumers doing? What does the shops look like? What does Walmart look like? I've heard less. I don't know what to make of it. I've heard less talk about that this year than in ages.
Yeah, so I think what we've seen from the consumer is generally hanging there, pretty solid results so far. You've seen some pretty decent same-store sales coming into this holiday season, so low single-digit growth and maybe in holiday spending.
Yeah.
That's not bad. The employment numbers are pretty solid.
Highlight of my day, I got an email from Bramo. Bramo emails in, asked Lisa if she can borrow a bottle of the Kirkland eggnog liqueur.
Wow.
Yeah, Bramowitz house is going there.
That's how they roll.
One of the offspring called up and said, get whatever that eggnog is.
We do the other egg. We do coquito. That's the coquito. It's the Spanish version of eggnog. Yes, we make it from scratch.
Of course, it's organic. It's gluten-free.
It's gluten-free. It's granola. Have a wonderful holiday season. On Bloomberg Television, on Bloomberg Radio, we continue. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.